You're nothing special. Just survive, keep your head down, and maybe you'll live long enough to be useful." That's what the orphanage matron had told Elowen every single day of her My Elowen Blay life. But when you woke up surrounded by wolves with glowing eyes and ancient power thrumming through your veins, you learned that survival was never the plan, it was always about destiny. And destiny, Elowen would discover, had teeth. Chapter 1. The Half-Blood Nobody. Elowen's fingers bled as she scrubbed the stone floor of the Silverpine orphanage for the third time that morning. The matron, a cruel, sharp-faced woman named Delphine, stood over her with arms crossed, her lips curled in perpetual disgust. "Pathetic," Delphine muttered. "Look at you. 16 years old and still can't shift. Half-blood trash." Elowen didn't look up. She'd learned long ago that eye contact only invited more cruelty. Her dark hair fell in tangled waves around her face, hiding the bruise on her left cheek from yesterday's lesson about talking back. "My daughter Vivienne shifted at 12, Delphine continued, her voice dripping with venom disguised as concern. "She's already being courted by 3 eligible wolves from the northern pack. But you'll be lucky if anyone takes you as a servant." Elowen's hands trembled, but she kept scrubbing. The truth was worse than Delphine's insults. Elowen wasn't just a late bloomer, she was broken, half human, half wolf, and fully belonging to neither world. Her mother had been human, her father a low-ranking wolf who'd abandoned them both. When her mother died of fever 7 years ago, Elowen became property of the state, which meant property of Delphine's orphanage. "Did you hear me?" Delphine's boot connected with Elowen's ribs, sending her sprawling across the wet floor. "Yes, matron," Elowen gasped. "Good. Now hurry up. The Alpha's envoy arrives tonight, and I won't have this place looking like a hovel. Vivienne needs to make a good impression." Elowen's heart sank. The Alpha's envoy. Once every 5 years, representatives from the royal pack traveled through the territories, observing young wolves, sometimes selecting promising candidates for service in the capital. It was every orphan's dream, a chance at a real life. But not for Elowen. She'd already been rejected twice. "Unshifted half-bloods need not apply," the last envoy had said, barely glancing at her. As Delphine's footsteps faded down the corridor, Elowen allowed herself one moment of weakness. She sat back on her heels and touched the small pendant hidden beneath her ragged dress, the only thing her mother had left her. It was a strange thing, carved from black stone that always felt warm against her skin, etched with symbols she couldn't read. "You're special, my darling," her mother had whispered on her deathbed, pressing the pendant into Elowen's small hands. "Never let them convince you otherwise. When the time comes, you'll understand." But 9 years had passed, and Elowen still didn't understand anything except hunger, exhaustion, and the constant ache of being unwanted. "Elowen," Vivienne's shrill voice echoed from upstairs. "Come do my hair, and don't touch it with those disgusting bloody hands." Elowen looked down at her fingers, cracked and raw from lye soap and harsh work. She wrapped them in her apron and climbed the stairs to Vivienne's room. Vivienne was everything Elowen wasn't. Golden-haired, perfectly shifted at 12, now 19, and radiating the confident beauty of a wolf in her prime. She sat at her vanity, already dressed in a silk gown that cost more than Elowen would see in a lifetime. "About time," Vivienne sneered, not bothering to look at Elowen in the mirror. "The envoy will be here in 2 hours, and I need to look absolutely perfect. Mother says if I impress them enough, they might recommend me for a position at court. Can you imagine? Me, in the capital, catching the eye of some powerful wolf? Maybe even—" She paused, dramatically, her eyes gleaming with ambition. "Maybe even the Alpha King himself." Elowen began brushing Vivienne's hair with practiced, gentle strokes. She'd learned to be invisible during these sessions, to let Vivienne's words wash over her without reaction. "Of course, you'll never have to worry about any of that," Vivienne continued, her voice sweet poison. "Mother's already arranged for you to be sent to the mines after tonight. She says there's no point wasting food on a wolf who can't even shift. At least in the mines, you'll be useful." The brush slipped from Elowen's hand. "Pick it up," Vivienne commanded. Elowen bent to retrieve it, her mind reeling. The mines. The place where wolves went to die slowly, crushed by quotas and cave-ins and the toxic dust that destroyed lungs. She'd be dead within a year. "Oh, don't look so dramatic," Vivian laughed. "Mother's being generous, really. She could have just thrown you out to become a rogue. At least this way, you'll have food and shelter. Basic food and shelter, but still." Elowen finished the elaborate hairstyle in silence, her hands moving automatically while her thoughts spiraled. She had to leave. Tonight. Before the envoy came and went. Before Delphine made good on her threat. She had no money, no plan, but anything was better than the mines. "There," Elowen whispered, stepping back. Vivienne examined herself critically in the mirror, then smiled. "I suppose it'll do. Now get out of my sight. You smell like poverty." Elowen fled to her tiny room, barely more than a closet beneath the stairs, and began gathering her few possessions. An extra dress, her mother's pendant, a piece of bread she'd hidden from breakfast. It wasn't much, but it would have to be enough. She would wait until the envoy's arrival created chaos and distraction, then slip out through the kitchen door. The forest beyond Silverpine was dangerous, full of rogues and wild animals, but Elowen had survived 16 years of Delphine's cruelty. She could survive anything. As the sun began to set, Elowen heard the commotion of the envoy's arrival. Horses, carriages, the excited chatter of the other orphans gathered to watch. She crept toward the kitchen, her small bundle clutched to her chest. She was 3 steps from the door when pain exploded through her skull. "Did you really think I wouldn't notice?" Delphine's voice was ice and fury. "Did you think I wouldn't see you plotting to run?" Elowen's vision blurred as Delphine grabbed her hair, dragging her away from the door. "You ungrateful little leech. After everything I've done for you, fed you, clothed you, given you a roof, this is how you repay me." "Please," Elowen gasped. "I'm sorry, Oh, you will be sorry." Delphine's grip tightened. "I was going to wait until tomorrow to send you to the mines, but I think tonight works better. Right now, in fact. The mine overseer's wagon is outside. I'll tell him you're ready to go." "No." Elowen struggled, genuine fear flooding through her. "Please. Not tonight. I'll do anything. Should have thought of that before trying to steal from me." Delphine's smile was vicious. "That bread in your bundle? That's theft. I could have you whipped for that." She dragged Elowen toward the back entrance, where a rough-looking man with a scarred face waited beside a wagon with iron bars. The mine overseer. His eyes were dead things, devoid of compassion. "This the half-blood?" he grunted. "Yes," Delphine said, shoving Elowen forward. "Take her, and make sure she works hard enough to justify the expense of keeping her alive." The overseer's hand closed around Elowen's arm like a vice. She tried to pull away, but he was too strong. He began dragging her toward the wagon, and Elowen's survival instinct finally kicked in. She twisted, bit down hard on his hand, and ran. Into the forest, into the darkness. Behind her, she heard shouting Delphine's fury, the overseer's curses, but she didn't look back. She ran deeper into the trees, branches tearing at her dress and skin, until the sounds of pursuit faded. She ran until her lungs burned and her legs gave out. She collapsed in a clearing she didn't recognize, gasping for breath, her mother's pendant hot against her chest, so hot it burned. And that's when she heard them. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, circling her. Elowen looked up and her blood turned to ice. Eyes. Dozens of glowing eyes in the darkness, surrounding her completely. Wolves. Massive, powerful, their forms barely visible in the moonlight filtering through the trees. Not rogues. These wolves moved with too much coordination, too much purpose. The largest one stepped forward, a massive black wolf with silver markings on its face and eyes that glowed like molten gold. It stared at Elowen with an intelligence that was distinctly, terrifyingly human. Elowen scrambled backward, but there was nowhere to go. She was surrounded. The black wolf's lips pulled back, revealing teeth as long as her fingers. And then Elowen's pendant erupted with light. Blinding, white-hot light that poured from the black stone and engulfed her entire body. She screamed as power ancient, overwhelming, foreign flooded through her veins like liquid fire. Her bones shifted, cracked, reformed. Her skin burned and her vision exploded into 1,000 new colors and scents and sensations. She was shifting. For the first time in her life, Elowen was shifting. But it felt wrong, too powerful, too complete, too much. This wasn't the simple transformation Vivienne had described, wasn't the smooth change the other orphans talked about. This was something else entirely. When the light finally faded, Elowen looked down at herself and gasped. She wasn't on 4 legs. She was still human-shaped, but her hands had become claws tipped with black talons. Her skin was marked with glowing silver patterns that pulsed with each heartbeat, and when she caught her reflection in a nearby puddle, she saw that her eyes, her ordinary brown eyes, now burned with the same golden light as the pendant. The massive black wolf hadn't moved. It sat back on its haunches, its golden eyes fixed on her with an expression that might have been recognition. Then, in a shimmer of light, the wolf shifted into a man, the most devastatingly beautiful man Elowen had ever seen. Tall, powerfully built, with black hair and those same molten gold eyes. He wore clothing that marked him as nobility or higher, and when he spoke, his voice resonated with authority that made every instinct in Elowen's newly awakened wolf scream at her to submit. "Impossible," he breathed, staring at her with something between wonder and shock. You're Omega." Elowen didn't understand. "What?" The man took a step closer, and every wolf in the clearing dropped to their bellies in submission. He ignored them, his entire focus on Elowen. "The markings, the partial shift, the power in your scent." His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "You're not just Omega. You're Prime Omega. The first in 300 years. "I don't understand," Elowen repeated, backing away. "I'm nobody. I'm just a half-blood who couldn't shift. You've been dormant." The man's eyes tracked her every movement with predatory intensity. "Your power locked away until the right trigger. And now." He inhaled deeply, his pupils dilating. "Now you're radiating enough Omega pheromones to draw every unmated alpha for 50 miles. As if summoning them, howls erupted from the forest. Distant at first, then closer. Many voices, all responding to something Elowen couldn't hear but apparently broadcasted like a beacon. The man's expression hardened. "We need to move. Now." "Who are you?" Elowen demanded, even as more howls joined the chorus. He looked at her, and in his golden eyes, she saw something that made her breath catch. Possession. Certainty. Destiny. "Cale Nightborn," he said, "Alpha King of the Northern Territories." His voice dropped to a growl that vibrated through her newly awakened senses. "And whether you understand it yet or not, you're mine. You've always been mine." He moved faster than thought, scooping Elowen into his arms. As the first rogues burst into the clearing, wild-eyed, slavering, drawn by her scent. "Hold on," Cale commanded. And then he was running, the other wolves forming a protective circle around them, and Elowen's world dissolved into chaos and speed, and the overwhelming certainty that her life had just changed forever. Chapter 2. The Alpha King's Declaration. Elowen's world had become a blur of silver fur and golden eyes and speed she'd never imagined possible. Cale Nightborn, the Alpha King, ran with her cradled against his chest like she weighed nothing, his wolves flanking them in perfect formation as snarls and howls erupted behind them. "How many?" Cale's voice was calm despite the chaos, directed at a russet-colored wolf running beside him. The wolf yipped twice, and somehow, Cale understood. 12 rogues. More coming. His arms tightened around Elowen. "We need to reach the border before." A massive gray wolf burst from the trees ahead, foam dripping from its jaws, eyes wild with Omega lust. It launched itself directly at Elowen. Cale twisted mid-stride, using his body as a shield. The rogue's claws raked across his shoulder, tearing fabric and skin. But Cale didn't slow. With one hand still holding Elowen, he grabbed the rogue by the throat and squeezed. The sickening crack echoed through the forest. The rogue fell, lifeless, and Cale kept running. Elowen stared at the blood on his shoulder, black in the moonlight, and realized with terrifying clarity that she'd just watched someone die. Because of her. Because of whatever she'd become. "I don't understand," she gasped. "What's happening to me?" Later. Cale's jaw was tight. Right now, survival. They broke through the tree line into a clearing, where more wolves waited, these ones organized, wearing leather harnesses marked with an insignia Elowen didn't recognize. Royal guards, at least 30 of them, forming a defensive perimeter around what looked like a temporary camp. The moment Cale crossed into the clearing, the sounds of pursuit stopped. The rogues howling in the forest didn't follow. They won't cross the border, Cale explained, finally setting Elowen on her feet. Her legs nearly gave out, and his hand shot out to steady her. The touch sent electricity racing up her arm. Royal territory. Even rogue madness has limits. Elowen pulled away from his grip, needing distance, needing to think. But the moment she stepped back, every wolf in the clearing turned to look at her. Their eyes tracked her movements with unnerving intensity, their nostrils flaring. "Eyes down," Cale commanded, his voice cracking like a whip. "All of you." Immediately, every wolf dropped their gaze. The tension in the air lessened, but didn't disappear. Cale turned back to Elowen, and she saw the struggle in his expression. The way his pupils had blown wide, the slight tremor in his hands before he clenched them into fists. He was controlling himself, barely, and the realization made her stomach twist. "You need to understand what you are," he said, his voice rough. "Before sunrise, every unmated alpha within 100 miles will be tracking your scent. Some will try to claim you. Others will try to kill you before you can be claimed. Either way, you're in danger." "Then tell me." Elowen's voice cracked. "Tell me what I am. An hour ago, I was just a worthless half-blood who couldn't shift. Now you're calling me Omega and Prime, and saying I belong to you. You're not worthless." Cale's interruption was fierce. "You never were. Someone locked your wolf away, probably when you were a child. A powerful binding spell designed to keep you hidden." Elowen's hand flew to her mother's pendant. "My mother gave me this before she died. She said I was special, that I'd understand when the time came. May I?" Cale held out his hand. Elowen hesitated, then pulled the pendant from beneath her torn dress. The black stone still glowed faintly, warm against her palm. Cale's expression shifted to something like awe. "Moonstone, blessed by the lunar temple 3 centuries ago." His eyes met hers. "Your mother didn't just give you a keepsake, Elowen. She gave you a lock. The binding spell was embedded in the stone, keeping your true nature hidden until you were old enough, strong enough to survive the awakening." "Survive what?" Elowen demanded. "What am I?" Cale gestured to a tent at the center of the camp. "Come. You need to understand the history." Inside the tent, maps covered every surface. Territories marked in different colors, notes written in elegant script, markers showing pack locations and alliances. Cale lit several lanterns, then turned to face her. "Wolf hierarchy is simple on the surface," he began. "Alphas lead, betas support, omegas." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Omegas are rare, maybe 1 in 10,000 wolves. They're smaller, usually, with a unique scent that promotes pack bonding and stability. Most live quiet lives, protected by their packs. But I'm not most omegas," Elowen said flatly. "No." Cale's golden eyes fixed on her. "You're Prime Omega. The old bloodline, the kind that appears maybe once every few centuries." He moved to one of the maps, pointing to a faded illustration of a wolf with glowing markings identical to the ones now covering Elowen's skin. "Prime Omegas don't just stabilize packs, they change them. Their presence makes alphas stronger, betas more loyal, the entire pack more powerful. Wars have been fought over Prime Omegas, dynasties built on their bloodlines." His voice dropped. "And 300 years ago, the last Prime Omega was murdered, torn apart by fighting alphas who all wanted to claim her." Elowen felt sick. "So you're saying I'm, what, some kind of prize to be won?" "I'm saying you're in danger." Cale stepped closer. "Every alpha with ambition will want you, not because of who you are, but because of what claiming you would mean for their power. You're not just a person to them, you're a weapon, a tool, a way to dominate every other pack." "Then let me go," Elowen said desperately. "Let me run, hide. I can." "You can't hide." Cale's voice was gentle but firm. Not anymore. The binding spell broke when your wolf awakened. Now your scent will draw alphas until someone claims you. The bond marks you as taken, puts you under the protection of an alpha, strong enough to defend you. Eowyn backed away until her back hit the tent wall. And let me guess you want to be that alpha. Cale's jaw clenched. Want has nothing to do with it. Then what? He moved faster than she could track, suddenly close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. His scent engulfed her pine and snow, and something wild that made her newly awakened wolf whimper with recognition. The moment you shifted, he said quietly. The moment your true nature revealed itself, the mate bond snapped into place. He touched his chest, right over his heart. Here, like a hook buried so deep I couldn't remove it if I tried. You felt it too, don't lie. Eowyn had felt something. When he'd first shifted from wolf to man, when their eyes met, there had been a pull. A recognition so profound it felt like remembering something she'd always known. But she wouldn't admit it. Not to him. Not when her entire life had just been ripped apart. I don't want a mate, she whispered. I don't want any of this. Pain flashed across Cale's face, gone so quickly she almost missed it. I know. And if we lived in a different world, I'd give you the choice. I'd let you decide in your own time, without pressure, without politics. He stepped back, creating distance between them. But we don't have that luxury. By tomorrow night, the other alphas will know what you are. They'll come for you, and some of them, his expression darkened, some of them won't care about consent. They'll force the bond, claim you by violence if necessary. You're trying to scare me into accepting you, Eowyn accused. I'm trying to keep you alive. Cale's voice was steel wrapped in silk. But I'll make you a deal. Give me 3 days. Stay under my protection for 3 days. Let me prove I'm not like the others. If, at the end of that time, you still want nothing to do with me, I'll help you find a way to suppress your omega nature. It won't be permanent, but it'll buy you time. Why would you do that? Eowyn asked suspiciously. If the mate bond is so important, because unlike every other alpha you're going to meet, Cale interrupted. I don't want a mate who's with me out of fear or obligation. The raw honesty in his voice made her chest ache. I want a partner, an equal, someone who chooses me. Even if it means I have to wait. Even if it means you ultimately choose someone else. Eowyn studied his face, looking for the lie, the manipulation. But all she saw was exhaustion and determination, and something that looked dangerously like hope. 3 days, she finally said, but I'm not promising anything after that. 3 days, Cale agreed. That's all I ask. A wolf howled from the perimeter, a warning signal. Cale's head snapped toward the sound, his entire body going rigid. They're here already, earlier than I expected. Who? Alphas, drawn by your scent. He moved to the tent entrance, then looked back at her. Stay here. Don't come out no matter what you hear. My guards will protect you. Where are you going? His smile was all teeth and no warmth. To have a conversation about boundaries and consequences. He paused at the entrance. And Eowyn, if any of them try to enter this tent, don't hesitate. Your wolf knows how to fight now. Trust her. Then he was gone, leaving Eowyn alone with the glowing marks on her skin and the sounds of approaching wolves echoing through the night. She moved to the tent flap, peering through a small gap. What she saw made her blood run cold. At least 20 wolves, all massive, all clearly alphas, had gathered at the border of the clearing. They hadn't crossed into royal territory, not yet, but they paced the line like predators waiting for weakness. Cale stood alone between them and the camp, still in human form, arms crossed. Gentlemen. His voice carried across the clearing with unnatural clarity. You're trespassing near royal encampment. State your business or leave. A huge gray wolf shifted into a man scarred, brutal looking, with eyes that made Eowyn want to hide. You know why we're here, Nightborn. We can all smell her. Prime Omega, the first in 3 centuries. His grin was vicious. By ancient law, she's unclaimed. That means any alpha can challenge for the right to court her. Ancient law, Cale said mildly, also states that Prime Omegas must be protected during their awakening period, 28 days of safety before any claims can be made. That law applies when the Omega awakens under controlled circumstances. Another alpha called out, this one younger, with cunning eyes. Not when she awakens in the wild. When that happens, she's fair game. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the gathered alphas. Cale's expression didn't change. I see. So you're arguing that because she awakened in a forest, pursued by rogues, terrified and alone, she should be considered fair game for any alpha aggressive enough to claim her by force? We're arguing, the scarred alpha said, that you don't have exclusive rights just because you found her first. Found her? Cale's laugh was cold. I didn't find her. She's my mate. The bond snapped into place the moment she shifted. Shocked silence, then chaos. Impossible. The mate bond doesn't work that fast. He's lying to stake a false claim. Cale raised his hand, and somehow the gesture commanded silence. I don't expect you to take my word for it, but I do expect you to respect the fact that she's under royal protection. Anyone who challenges that will answer to me personally. The scarred alpha stepped forward, muscles rippling under his skin. With all due respect, Your Majesty, if she's truly your mate, prove it. Bring her out. Let us see the bond marks. The bond isn't complete yet, Cale said. She's still awakening, still adjusting. Convenient, the scarred alpha sneered. I think you're lying. I think you found an unclaimed Prime Omega, and you're trying to hoard her before the rest of us can make our case. Then you're welcome to think that, Cale said softly. From a safe distance, outside my territory. If you're still here when the sun rises, I'll consider it a declaration of war. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Most of the alphas began backing away, clearly unwilling to risk open conflict with the Alpha King. But the scarred alpha didn't move. What's your name? Cale asked, his voice deceptively casual. Royce Darkwater, Alpha of the Western Vale Pack. Well, Royce Darkwater. Cale's smile was a predator's promise. Here's what's going to happen. You and your little delegation are going to leave, now. And you're going to spread the word that the Prime Omega is under my protection and completely off limits. And if we don't? Royce challenged. Cale shifted. It happened so fast Elowen almost missed it. One moment he was human, the next he was the massive black wolf she'd first seen, but bigger, easily twice the size of any other wolf in the clearing, with power radiating from him in waves that made even Elowen's untrained senses scream danger. The russet wolf from earlier shifted to human form, a woman with warrior's scars and fierce eyes. Alpha Darkwater, she called out, her voice carrying clear warning. The king is being generous. Accept his terms and leave. Now. Royce stared at Cale's wolf form, and Elowen saw the exact moment his bravado crumbled into survival instinct. He shifted back to wolf and retreated, followed quickly by the others. Within minutes, the clearing was empty except for Cale's guards. Cale shifted back to human form, and Elowen saw him sway slightly before steadying himself. The wound on his shoulder had reopened, blood seeping through his torn shirt. He turned toward the tent, and their eyes met through the gap in the fabric. Even from a distance, Elowen felt it, the pull. The bond he'd mentioned, like a thread connecting them, humming with potential. She stepped back, letting the tent flap fall closed, her heart hammering. 3 days. She'd agreed to 3 days. But as she touched her glowing marks and felt the foreign power thrumming through her veins, Elowen wondered if 3 days would be enough to understand anything about her new reality, or if 3 days would only make leaving impossible. Subscribe if you believe Elowen deserves better than a life spent running from who she truly is. Because people like Elowen need an audience that won't abandon them when the truth gets complicated. Drop a comment if Elowen's fear is your fear too. The terror of discovering you're something you never asked to be. Chapter 3. The Mark of Protection. Elowen didn't sleep. How could she? Every sound outside the tent made her jump. The rustle of guards changing positions, the distant howl of wolves in the forest, the whisper of wind through canvas. She sat on the simple cot Cale's guards had provided, still wearing her torn orphanage dress, her glowing marks gradually fading to faint silver lines that traced patterns across her skin like ancient writing. She'd tried to understand them, these marks. Tried to make sense of the symbols that seemed to shift and change when she wasn't looking directly at them. Her mother had called her special. The matron had called her worthless. And now the Alpha King called her his mate. Which one was the lie? Dawn crept through the tent's entrance, gray and cold, and with it came a knock, gentle, almost hesitant. "Elowen?" Cale's voice was rough with exhaustion. "May I come in?" She should say no, should maintain distance, keep the boundaries clear. But the memory of his blood, black in the moonlight, spilled to protect her, made her answer. "Yes." He entered slowly, moving like someone trying not to startle a wounded animal. In the early morning light, he looked different, less like the terrifying Alpha King, and more like a man who hadn't slept, whose shoulder was wrapped in crude bandages already seeping red, whose eyes held shadows that had nothing to do with the night. "You're hurt," Elowen said, then cursed herself for stating the obvious. "I've had worse." Cale lowered himself onto a camp stool near the tent entrance carefully, keeping distance between them. The rogue's claws weren't silver-tipped, so it'll heal. Just needs time. Elowen knew about silver. Every wolf did. It was the one substance that could kill them, that prevented healing, that turned simple wounds into death sentences. The orphanage had kept silver chains in the cellar for problem children. Elowen had warned them twice. "You put yourself between me and that rogue," she said quietly. "You could have just moved. Let it take me. Would have solved all your problems." Cale's head snapped up, his golden eyes fierce. "You are not a problem to be solved." His voice was hard. "And I would take 1,000 claws before I let anyone rogue or alpha or anyone else lay a hand on you against your will." The intensity in his words made her chest tight. She looked away, focusing on the maps scattered across the small camp table. "Why? Why what? Why do you care?" Elowen met his gaze again. The mate bond snapped into place. "Fine. But you don't know me. For all you know, I'm exactly what the matron said, worthless half-blood trash who can't even shift properly." Cale was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd heard it. "My mother was Omega, not Prime, but strong, beautiful, kind." His jaw clenched. "When I was 7, she was challenged by a rival pack's alpha. He wanted to claim her, to use her bond with my father as leverage for power. My father was away leading border patrols. It was supposed to be safe." Elowen's stomach sank. "What happened?" "The rival alpha forced his way into our home with 12 warriors, killed our guards, found my mother in the garden." Cale's hands curled into fists. She fought. She was Omega, not built for combat, but she fought anyway, bought enough time for the alarm to sound. My father returned to find her bleeding out on the stones, and the rival alpha grinning over her body. "Gods," Elowen whispered. "My father went feral, killed all 13 of them with his bare hands." Cale's voice was hollow now, recounting facts without emotion. "But my mother was already gone, and my father, he never recovered. The mate bond nearly destroyed him when she died. He held on long enough to see me reach 18, then walked into the mountains one winter morning and never came back." Elowen understood now, the fierceness in his protection, the way he'd stood alone against 20 alphas without hesitation. "You're trying to save me because you couldn't save her." "No." Cale looked at her directly. "I'm trying to save you because you deserve to be saved. Because the world that killed my mother, the world that treats Omegas like possessions, instead of people, that world needs to change. And maybe if I can protect you, give you the choice she never had, it's a start." The honesty in his words cracked something in Elowen's chest. She'd spent 16 years being told she was nothing, being treated like a burden, a mistake, a creature without value. And here was the most powerful alpha in the territories, wounded and exhausted, telling her she mattered. It was almost too much. "Your bandage is bleeding through," she said, needing to focus on something concrete. "Let me look at it." Cale hesitated. "You don't have to. You protected me. The least I can do is make sure you don't die of infection." When he still didn't move, she added, "Please." That one word seemed to break through his resistance. He moved to sit on the cot, carefully removing his torn shirt to expose the wound. It was worse than Elowen had thought. 4 deep gouges across his shoulder and upper chest, the edges ragged, angry red. The crude bandaging had done little except soak up blood. "This needs proper cleaning." Elowen muttered, looking around the tent. Do you have medical supplies? There's a kit in the chest over there. Elowen found it a surprisingly well-stocked kit with clean cloth, antiseptic that smelled like herbs, and curved needles with thread. She'd watched the orphanage healer work often enough, had even helped a few times when the matron was too drunk to notice. She returned to Cale, kneeling in front of him to get a better angle. This close, his scent was overwhelming, that mixture of pine and snow and wildness that made her wolf stir restlessly inside her. This will hurt, she warned. I've survived worse, Cale said again, but she heard the tension in his voice. She began cleaning the wound as gently as possible, but there was no way to make it painless. To his credit, Cale didn't flinch, didn't make a sound, just sat perfectly still while she worked, his breathing carefully controlled. You learned medical care at the orphanage? He asked after a moment. I learned a lot of things at the orphanage, most of them about survival. Elowen rinsed the cloth and started on the second gouge. The healer there was decent when she was sober. She'd let me watch her work sometimes. Said I had steady hands. You do, Cale observed. Steady and gentle. Something in his tone made her look up. Their faces were inches apart, his golden eyes fixed on her with an intensity that stole her breath. She could see flecks of amber in those eyes, could count each individual eyelash, could feel the heat radiating from his skin. The mate bond hummed between them, that invisible thread she was starting to recognize, pulling them together like gravity. Elowen forced herself to look back at the wound. Tell me about being Alpha King. What does that actually mean? If Cale noticed her deflection, he didn't comment. It means responsibility. The Northern Territories contain 43 packs, nearly 20,000 wolves. I'm supposed to keep them safe, prosperous, and at peace with each other, which is... He paused, searching for words. Complicated. Some packs have feuds going back centuries. Some refuse to cooperate with neighboring packs. Some want more territory, more resources, more power. Sounds exhausting. It is. A hint of dark humor crept into his voice. Especially when you factor in the politics. Every alpha with an eligible daughter has tried to arrange a match. Every pack with a grievance wants my personal intervention, and every decision I make is scrutinized by 43 sets of eyes looking for weakness. Elowen began stitching the deepest gouge, her hands moving with practiced precision. Is that why you haven't taken a mate before? Too busy dealing with politics? Partially. Cale was quiet for a moment. Mostly because I refused to settle for a political alliance. My father's bond with my mother, despite how it ended, was real. True, I saw how they looked at each other. How they moved like two parts of one whole. His voice dropped. I wanted that. Or nothing at all. And now you think you have it with me, Elowen said carefully. A person you met 6 hours ago. Who you know nothing about. I know you're brave. Cale's response was immediate. You ran from the mines despite knowing the forest was dangerous. You tried to escape a life you didn't want, even though you had no plan and no resources. That takes courage. That takes desperation, Elowen corrected, tying off the first stitch and starting the second. Same thing, sometimes. His hand twitched like he wanted to touch her, then stopped. I also know you're kind. You're treating my wound even though you don't trust me. Even though I represent everything you're afraid of. I'm afraid of a lot of things right now, Elowen admitted. Afraid of these marks. Afraid of these alphas hunting me. Afraid of this bond that apparently decided my fate without asking permission. She tied off another stitch. But mostly I'm afraid of losing the choice. Of waking up one day and realizing I've become someone else's possession. You won't. Cale's voice was iron certainty. Not while I'm breathing. Elowen finished the last stitch and began bandaging the wound with clean cloth. You can't promise that. You said yourself alphas will keep coming. Eventually one might be stronger, or smarter, or have more resources. Let them come. The growl in Cale's voice vibrated through her. I've held the throne for 8 years against every challenge. I've ended 3 civil wars, survived 2 assassination attempts, and united packs that had been enemies for generations. I didn't do all that just to lose you to some ambitious alpha with delusions of grandeur. The possessiveness in his words should have frightened her. Instead, it sent warmth curling through her chest, her wolf responding to the promise of protection, of belonging. Dangerous. This was dangerous. Elowen secured the bandage and sat back on her heels, putting distance between them. There. Try not to tear it open again. Thank you. Cale carefully put his shirt back on a fresh one someone must have brought while she wasn't looking. You should rest. Proper rest. The next few days will be challenging. What happens in the next few days? Cale stood, moving toward the tent entrance. Today, I send messengers to the 43 packs informing them that I've found my mate. Tomorrow, we travel to the capital, where you'll be under maximum security, and in 3 days. He looked back at her. In 3 days, you make your choice. What if I choose to leave? Elowen asked, needing to know. Pain flickered across his face again, but his voice stayed steady. Then I'll honor our agreement. I'll help you find a way to suppress your Omega nature temporarily, provide you with resources and protection, and let you go. He paused, but I'll spend every day after hoping you change your mind. He left before she could respond, the tent flap falling closed behind him. Elowen sat alone in the growing daylight, her hands still smelling of antiseptic and blood, her marks pulsing faintly with each heartbeat. 3 days. It seemed impossible to make such a life-altering decision in 3 days, but as she touched the place where the mate bond thrummed beneath her ribs, warm and insistent and undeniably real, Elowen wondered if the decision had already been made. The moment their eyes met in that clearing, the moment the bond snapped into place, the moment her locked-away wolf recognized its other half. Outside, she heard Cale giving orders to his guards, his voice carrying the authority of a king, but inside, Elowen had heard something else. Something vulnerable and honest and achingly human. She curled up on the cot, exhausted but unable to sleep, and tried not to think about how natural it had felt to touch him. How right it had felt to care for his wounds. How much she'd wanted to close that gap between them and… No, she couldn't think like that. Not yet. Not until she understood what it meant to be Prime Omega. Not until she knew if this bond was real choice or just biology making decisions for her. 3 days. She could survive 3 days. She'd survived 16 years of the matron's cruelty. She could survive this. But as sleep finally claimed her, Elowen's dreams were full of golden eyes and promises of protection and the terrifying possibility that maybe, just maybe, she didn't want to survive alone anymore. Chapter 4. The Journey to the Capital. The carriage was far nicer than anything Elowen had ever experienced. Velvet cushions, polished wood, windows with actual glass instead of rough shutters. It swayed gently as the horses pulled it along the forest road, surrounded by 30 royal guards in both human and wolf form. Elowen sat across from Cale, trying not to stare at the passing landscape. She'd never left Silverpine before, never seen the vast pine forests that stretched endlessly in every direction. Never watched mountains emerge from morning mist like sleeping giants. Beautiful, isn't it? Cale's voice was soft, careful not to break whatever fragile peace had settled between them since dawn. I didn't know the world was so big, Elowen admitted. At the orphanage, everything was the same 4 walls, the same gray stones, the same… She stopped, not wanting to dwell on memories of cruelty and confinement. You'll never see those walls again, Cale said with quiet certainty. Whatever you choose in 3 days, I promise you that much. You're free of that place. Free. The word felt foreign on her tongue. Elowen had never been free. Had never imagined she could be. The russet-haired woman from last night appeared at the carriage window, running alongside in human form with inhuman grace. Your Majesty, scouts report movement 3 miles east. Could be merchant caravan. Could be scouts from rival packs. Increase the perimeter, Cale ordered. And have Victor take wolf form. His nose is better than mine. The woman nodded and disappeared in a blur of speed. That's Commander Lyris, Cale explained, seeing Elowen's curious expression. My head of security. She's been with me since I took the throne. Saved my life at least 4 times that I can count. She seems… intense. She is, but loyal beyond measure. Cale leaned back against the cushions, and Elowen noticed the careful way he moved, favoring his wounded shoulder. You'll meet the rest of my inner circle when we reach the capital. Fair warning, They're going to be protective, possibly overwhelming. Because I'm Omega? Because you're important to me. The simple honesty in his words made her chest ache. And because they know what it means that the mate bond finally found me. They've been waiting 8 years for this. Elowen twisted her hands in her lap. The orphanage dress looked even more pathetic in the elegant carriage. I don't know how to be important to anyone. I don't know how to be whatever it is you need me to be. Cale leaned forward, his golden eyes intense. I need you to be exactly who you are, nothing more, nothing less. He paused. But I do think we should start your training. Training? Your wolf awakened, but you don't know how to control her yet. The partial shift last night, that's instinctive defense. But you need to learn full transformation, scent control, basic combat. His expression grew serious. Especially combat. I'll protect you with everything I have, but you need to be able to protect yourself too. The thought of fighting made Elowen's stomach clench. I'm not a warrior. I'm just your prime Omega, Cale interrupted gently, which means you're stronger than you realize. Your wolf has been dormant 16 years, but she's still there, still powerful. You just need to learn how to access that power. As if responding to his words, Elowen felt something stir inside her, that foreign presence she'd first noticed in the clearing. Her wolf, separate from her but also intrinsically part of her, like a second heartbeat. I can feel her, Elowen whispered. But I don't know how to communicate with her. Start simple. Close your eyes. Elowen obeyed, suddenly aware of the carriage's gentle rocking, the distant sound of guards talking, Cale's steady breathing across from her. Focus inward. Cale's voice became a guide, low and soothing. Find that presence. Don't force it. Just acknowledge she's there. Elowen concentrated, searching for that spark of otherness inside her consciousness. There, a flicker of awareness that wasn't quite her own. Curious, cautious, but present. Hello, Elowen thought tentatively. The response was immediate, not words, but sensation, warmth, recognition. And underneath it, a bone-deep loneliness that made Elowen's throat tight. Her wolf had been locked away her entire life. Conscious but unable to surface, trapped behind the binding spell. I'm sorry, Elowen thought toward that presence. I didn't know you were there. Forgiveness came in a rush of affection that brought tears to Elowen's eyes. Her wolf didn't blame her, didn't resent the lost years. She was just grateful to finally be acknowledged, to finally be seen. Good, Cale's voice anchored her. You've made contact. That's the first step. Now ask her about the partial shift, why she chose that form instead of full transformation. Elowen posed the question internally, and the answer came in images and instinct rather than words. The partial shift was protection, a way to access wolf strength and senses while maintaining human problem-solving and speech, useful for someone who'd grown up human, who thought in human patterns. She says partial shift is easier, Elowen explained, opening her eyes. More natural for someone who's been human their whole life. Cale nodded approvingly. Smart wolf. Mine did something similar when I first shifted at 13. Took me months to manage full transformation. He smiled slightly. You're already ahead of where I was. The carriage lurched suddenly, throwing Elowen forward. Cale caught her instinctively, his hands steadying her shoulders, and the contact sent electricity racing through her veins. Their faces were inches apart, his golden eyes wide with the same shock she felt. The mate bond flared between them, that invisible thread suddenly blazing hot and bright and demanding. Elowen scrambled backward, heart racing. What was that? The bond. Cale's voice was rough. It gets stronger when we touch. When we're close. He ran a hand through his dark hair, and she noticed his hand trembled slightly. I should have warned you. I'm sorry. Before Elowen could respond, Commander Lyris appeared at the window again. This time her expression was grim. Your Majesty. The movement wasn't a caravan. 20 wolves approaching from the east. They're flying the Darkwater banner. Cale's entire demeanor changed, the tender man from moments ago vanishing behind the Alpha King's cold authority. Royce Darkwater. That fool. He stood, moving toward the carriage door. He must have circled around after last night, trying to intercept us before we reach capital territory. What do we do? Elowen asked, fear creeping up her spine. You stay in the carriage with 4 guards. Lyris, assign your best. Cale was already stepping out. The rest of us will handle this. Handle it how? Elowen demanded, following him to the door. Cale turned back, and his expression made her wolf whimper with instinctive submission. This was the face of a predator, of a king who'd survived assassination attempts and civil wars. I gave Darkwater a warning last night. He chose to ignore it. Now he learns what happens when you threaten what's mine. The possessiveness in his voice should have angered her. Instead, it sent heat pooling in her stomach, her newly awakened wolf, responding to the display of dominance, of protection. Be careful, Elowen said before she could stop herself. Cale's expression softened fractionally. Always. Then he was gone, striding toward the approaching threat with his guards forming around him. 4 guards, 2 men, 2 women, all clearly experienced warriors climbed into the carriage. One of them, a scarred man with kind eyes, nodded to Elowen. I'm Garrett, my lady. We'll keep you safe. I'm not a lady, Elowen protested weakly. I'm just… You're the Alpha King's mate, Garrett interrupted gently. That makes you future queen, which makes you worth dying for. The casual way he said it, like dying for her was simply a fact, not a tragedy, made Elowen feel sick. Through the carriage window, she watched as Cale and his guards formed a defensive line. The Darkwater wolves emerged from the trees 20 strong, all in wolf form, with Royce Darkwater at their center in his massive gray wolf body. Cale didn't shift. He stood in human form, arms crossed, radiating authority that made even Royce hesitate. You were warned, Darkwater. Cale's voice carried across the distance with unnatural clarity. I told you what would happen if you pursued this path. Royce shifted to human form, a tactical mistake, Elowen realized, because now he looked smaller, less threatening. You're bluffing. You won't risk open war over a single Omega. She's not a single Omega. Cale's voice dropped to a dangerous purr. She's my Omega. My mate. And you just made the mistake of calling her single. The bond isn't complete, Royce argued. No marks, no claiming. She's still fair game. Final warning, Cale said softly. Leave now, and I'll consider this a moment of temporary insanity. Stay, and I'll consider it a declaration of war against the crown. Royce laughed sharp and bitter. You think you can take all 20 of us? Even you aren't that strong, Nightborn. Cale smiled. It was the most terrifying expression Elowen had ever seen. I don't have to take all 20 of you. I only have to take you. He moved, one moment standing still, the next covering the distance between them in a blur of speed that made Elowen gasp. He grabbed Royce by the throat, lifting the larger man off his feet with one hand, and slammed him into the ground hard enough that Elowen heard bones crack from 30 feet away. The Darkwater wolves surged forward, but Cale's guards met them, a coordinated defense that spoke of years training together. The sound of snarling and snapping filled the air, but Elowen's attention stayed fixed on Cale. He had Royce pinned, one hand still around his throat, the other pressed against his chest. You came here for my mate, Cale said, his voice carrying despite the chaos. You threatened her safety. You ignored my warning. Give me one reason I shouldn't kill you right now. Royce struggled, but Cale's grip was iron. The other packs won't stand for it. You kill me, they'll unite against you. Let them try. Cale leaned closer. I've fought civil wars before. I'll fight them again. But you? You're not worth the effort of war. You're just another ambitious alpha who doesn't understand that power without wisdom is just violence. He released Royce's throat but didn't move his other hand from his chest. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to take your wolves and leave. You're going to return to the Western Vale and stay there. And you're going to spread the word that anyone who threatens Elowen answers to me personally. And if I don't? Royce gasped. Cale's hand pressed down, and Elowen heard another crack, this time a rib. Then I'll kill you right here, right now. And let the crows feast on your corpse as a warning to the others. The casual brutality of the threat made Elowen's stomach turn. This was the other side of Cale, not the gentle man who'd let her tend his wounds, but the Alpha King who'd survived 8 years of challenges through strength and ruthlessness. Royce must have seen death in Cale's eyes, because he finally submitted. "Fine, we leave. We won't pursue her. Swear it," Cale demanded. "By your pack and your honor." "I swear," Royce choked out. "By pack and honor." "We won't pursue the Omega." Cale released him and stood, looking down at Royce with contempt. "Get out of my territory, and pray I never see your face again." Royce scrambled to his feet, shifted to wolf form, and fled with his pack following close behind. The fight ended as quickly as it began, Cale's guards letting them go, forming back into defensive positions around the carriage. Cale stood motionless for a moment, his chest heaving, then turned and walked back to the carriage. As he approached, Elowyn saw the change come over him, the predator receding, the man returning. He climbed back inside, and the carefully controlled mask slipped just enough for her to see the fear beneath. "Are you all right?" he asked immediately, his eyes scanning her for injuries despite the fact that she hadn't been touched. "I'm fine," Elowyn managed. "You're the one who just fought 20 wolves. Barely a warm-up." But his hands were shaking as he sat down across from her. "I'm sorry you had to see that. The violence. I wanted to spare you. You protected me," Elowyn interrupted. Again. She studied his face, looking for the monster she should fear, but seeing only exhaustion and worry and that same vulnerable honesty from earlier. "You broke his ribs." "I should have broken his neck," Cale said darkly. "He threatened you, came after you despite my warning. That's not something I can tolerate." "Because of the mate bond? Because you deserve to feel safe." Cale's golden eyes met hers. "The bond makes it more intense. Yes. Makes every threat against you feel like a threat against my own life. But even without the bond, I'd protect you. Because it's the right thing to do." The carriage lurched into motion again, continuing toward the capital. Elowyn watched the forest pass outside the window, her mind racing. She'd seen Cale's power now. Seen what he was capable of when threatened. It should have terrified her. Should have confirmed every fear she had about alphas and dominance and violence. Instead, all she could think about was the way his hands had shaken with fear for her safety, the way he'd apologized for violence she hadn't been hurt by, the way he looked at her like she was something precious instead of just powerful. 3 days, she said quietly. Cale looked up. "What?" "You gave me 3 days to decide." Elowyn met his gaze. "But I'm starting to think 3 days won't be enough to understand what I'm feeling. What any of this means." Something like hope flickered across Cale's face. "Then take more time. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. And if I decide I want to leave, will you let me go even if it means breaking the bond?" Pain lanced through Cale's expression, but his voice stayed steady. "Yes, even then, you're not a prisoner, Elowyn. You're..." He paused, searching for words. "You're the first person in 8 years who's made me feel like something other than the Alpha King. Like I'm just, Cale, a man who wants to know what makes you smile, what your dreams are, what you'd choose if the entire world wasn't pushing you toward one decision." Elowyn's throat felt tight. "I don't have dreams. I've spent 16 years just trying to survive." "Then I'll give you time to find them," Cale said softly. "And maybe, if you'll let me, I'll help you discover what it feels like to live instead of just survive." The sincerity in his words wrapped around Elowyn's heart like a physical thing. Dangerous. This was so dangerous. But as the carriage rolled on toward the capital and whatever future waited there, Elowyn realized something terrifying. She was starting to hope, and hope, she'd learned at the orphanage, was the cruelest thing of all. Because hope made you care, and caring gave the world power to break you all over again. Chapter 5. The Capital's Court. The capital city of Northspire rose from the mountain valley like something from a dream. White stone towers pierced the clouds, their surfaces carved with intricate wolf motifs that seemed to move in the shifting light. Bridges of silver metal connected the towers, suspended impossibly high above courtyards filled with gardens and fountains. And everywhere wolves moved through the streets in both human and animal form, living side by side in a harmony Elowyn had never imagined possible. "It's beautiful," she breathed, pressing her face against the carriage window. "It's home," Cale said, and she heard the pride in his voice. 3,000 years old. Built by the first Alpha King after the Great Unification. Every stone placed with purpose. Every tower representing one of the original packs that joined together. As the carriage passed through the main gates, massive things made of silver reinforced oak citizens stopped to stare. Word had clearly spread ahead of their arrival. Elowen heard whispers, saw pointing fingers, felt the weight of hundreds of eyes tracking their progress. "They know about me," she said nervously. "They know I've found my mate," Cale corrected. "They don't know the details yet. Just that after 8 years of refusing every political marriage, I've finally found someone." His expression grew serious. "There will be speculation, gossip, some of it kind, some of it cruel. Try to ignore it." Easy for him to say. He'd grown up in this world, understood its rules and hierarchies. Elowen had grown up scrubbing floors and hiding from the matron's fists. The royal palace sat at the heart of the city, a sprawling complex of interconnected buildings that made the orphanage look like a hovel. Guards in silver armor stood at attention as the carriage rolled through yet another set of gates. These ones, adorned with the royal crest. A black wolf with golden eyes beneath a crown of stars. When the carriage finally stopped, Cale stepped out first and offered his hand to Elowen. She hesitated, then took it, trying not to react to the jolt of electricity that raced up her arm at the contact. The mate bond hummed between them, growing stronger with each touch, each moment spent in proximity. Dangerous. A crowd waited in the palace courtyard, at least 24 people, all clearly important based on their fine clothing and confident bearing. At the front stood a tall woman, with silver-streaked black hair and eyes that assessed Elowen with sharp intelligence. "Your Majesty," the woman said, bowing slightly to Cale before turning her attention fully on Elowen. "And you must be the infamous Elowen. I'm Magistra Elena, the king's chief advisor. Welcome to Northspire." "Thank you," Elowen managed, feeling hopelessly out of place in her torn orphanage dress surrounded by all this finery. "Commander Lyris," Elena continued, "has already briefed us on the Darkwater incident. Security protocols are being updated as we speak." Her sharp eyes returned to Elowen. "You've caused quite a stir, my dear. The capital hasn't been this excited since the king's coronation 8 years ago." "I didn't mean to cause problems," Elowen said quietly. "Problems?" Elena laughed, a surprisingly warm sound. "Child, you're not a problem. You're the solution to about 50 different political headaches I've been managing for years. Do you know how many eligible daughters I've had to politely refuse on the king's behalf? At least 100. And now I can finally tell them all to give up hope." "Elena," Cale warned, but there was affection in his voice. "What? I'm being honest." Elena waved him off. "The girl needs to know what she's walking into. Speaking of which," she clapped her hands twice, and servants appeared as if from nowhere. "Get her to the royal quarters, draw a bath, find appropriate clothing, and for God's sake, get her something to eat. She looks like she hasn't had a proper meal in weeks." Elowen wanted to protest that she could manage herself, but the mention of food made her stomach growl audibly. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten properly. Breakfast at the orphanage had been thin gruel, and she'd been running for her life ever since. "Go," Cale said gently. "Get settled. I have meetings I can't postpone. But I'll check on you this evening." He paused, and something vulnerable flickered in his golden eyes. "Unless that's too presumptuous? I don't want to make you uncomfortable." The fact that he asked that the Alpha King was seeking permission from her made Elowen's chest ache. "It's fine. I'd like that." His smile was like sunrise. "Then I'll see you this evening." The servants, 3 women in elegant uniforms, led Elowen through a maze of corridors, each one more opulent than the last. Marble floors, tapestries depicting legendary battles, chandeliers that sparkled with what looked like actual diamonds. It was overwhelming. They finally reached a set of double doors carved with delicate floral patterns. The lead servant, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, pushed them open to reveal a suite that made Elowen stop dead in her tracks. It was enormous. The bedroom alone was bigger than the entire orphanage common room. A massive 4-poster bed dominated one wall, draped in silver and blue silk. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, offering a view that stretched for miles. And through an archway, Elowyn could see a bathroom with a tub large enough to swim in. "This can't be for me," Elowyn said faintly. "Royal guest quarters," the kind-eyed servant explained. "Until your official status is determined, you'll stay here. If you accept the king's suit, you'll move to the queen's chambers. If you choose to leave." She trailed off delicately. If Elowyn chose to leave, all this would disappear. Back to poverty, back to running, back to surviving instead of living. But staying meant accepting the bond, accepting Cale, accepting a role she had no idea how to fill. "Come," the servant said gently. "Let's get you bathed and fed. Everything else can wait." The bath was heaven. Hot water scented with lavender, soft soap that made her skin feel like silk, servants who washed her hair with gentle hands and didn't comment on the scars that crisscrossed her back, souvenirs from the matron's punishments. When Elowyn finally emerged, wrapped in a robe softer than clouds, she found clothing laid out on the bed. Not one outfit, but at least a dozen. Dresses in every color, pants and tunics for more practical wear, even training clothes in case she wanted to exercise. "We weren't sure of your preferences," the kind-eyed servant who'd introduced herself as Mara explained. "So Magistra Elena ordered variety. Choose whatever feels comfortable." Elowyn selected a simple dress in deep blue, elegant but not ostentatious, with long sleeves that covered the silver marks still faintly visible on her skin. When she looked at herself in the full-length mirror, she barely recognized the person staring back. Clean, well-dressed, almost pretty. "Beautiful," Mara corrected, as if reading her thoughts. "You're beautiful, my lady. Those marks, they're the sign of Prime Omega. They're considered sacred. They're considered valuable," Elowyn said bitterly. "There's a difference." Mara's expression softened. "Not to the king, there isn't. I've served the royal family for 20 years. I watched that boy grow up, watched him survive his mother's death and his father's grief. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. He doesn't know me," Elowyn protested. "Doesn't he?" Mara smiled. "The mate bond shows truth, my lady. It doesn't create feelings from nothing, it reveals what's already there. If the king's wolf chose you, it's because your souls recognized each other." Before Elowyn could respond, a knock sounded at the door. Mara opened it to reveal a young man, maybe 20, with sandy hair and nervous energy. "I'm supposed to escort Lady Elowyn to dinner," he announced, then blushed. "If she's ready. Not that I'm rushing. Take all the time you need. I'm Tobias, by the way. Junior diplomat. 3rd class. Not important, really." "But Magistra Elena thought." "Breathe, Tobias," Mara said kindly. "You're babbling." "Right, sorry." Tobias took a visible breath. "Lady Elowyn, the king requests the pleasure of your company for dinner. Private dinner, just the two of you, in his personal chambers. If you're comfortable with that. If not, arrangements can be made for—" "It's fine," Elowyn interrupted, taking pity on him. "I'll go." Tobias led her through more corridors, these ones quieter. Clearly the private sections of the palace where courtiers and servants didn't wander. They finally stopped at a set of doors guarded by 2 warriors in silver armor. The guards nodded to Tobias and opened the doors without comment. Cale's personal chambers were surprisingly modest compared to the guest suite, still luxurious, but lived in. Books scattered across tables, maps pinned to walls, a desk covered in correspondence and official-looking documents. This was clearly a workspace as much as living quarters. Cale stood by the windows, changed from his travel-stained clothes into simple black pants and a white shirt that made his dark hair and golden eyes even more striking. When he turned and saw her, his expression transformed. "Elowyn," he breathed. "You look clean?" she offered, trying for humor to cover her nervousness. "Radiant." His voice was rough with sincerity. "But I liked you just as much in torn dress and mud. It's not about the clothes." The honesty in his words made her chest tight. "You said something about dinner?" As if summoned, servants appeared with covered dishes, arranging them on a small table set by the windows. The smell alone made Elowyn's mouth water. Roasted meat, fresh bread, vegetables she couldn't even name. "I wasn't sure what you liked," Cale admitted as the servants departed, leaving them alone. So I ordered variety. There's also wine, if you want it. Or tea. Water. Juice. You're nervous, Elowen realized with surprise. Cale ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she was starting to recognize as his tell. Terrified, actually. I've negotiated peace treaties and faced down rebel armies without breaking a sweat. But the thought of having dinner with you, saying the wrong thing, making you uncomfortable. He laughed self-deprecatingly. Apparently that's what unmans me. Elowen moved to the table and sat, her wolf stirring at his vulnerability. Tell me about your day. The meetings you couldn't postpone. Cale sat across from her, seeming grateful for the neutral topic. Border disputes between the Ironwood and Silvercrest packs. They've been arguing over a tributary river for 6 months. Both sides convinced they have the rightful claim. He served her food as he talked generous portions, the best pieces. Then I had to deal with reports of rogue activity in the Southern Territories. Numbers are increasing, which usually means something's destabilizing the packs in that region. Do you always work this much? Elowen asked, tasting the roasted meat and nearly moaning. It was delicious, perfectly seasoned, tender, nothing like the gristle they'd served at the orphanage. Usually more, Cale admitted. Elena says I'm going to work myself into an early grave. But someone has to keep 43 packs from tearing each other apart. He watched her eat with obvious satisfaction. Good? Good doesn't begin to cover it, Elowen said honestly. This is the best meal I've ever had. Pain flickered across Cale's face. The orphanage didn't feed you properly. It wasn't a question, but Elowen answered anyway. They fed me enough to work. Nothing more. Delphine said wasting food on half-bloods was poor stewardship. Cale's hands clenched into fists. I'm going to pay a visit to that orphanage. Soon. Don't, Elowen said quickly. It's not worth your time. She's not worth your anger. She hurt you. Cale's voice was ice and fury. She starved you, abused you, tried to send you to the mines to die. That's absolutely worth my anger. Then be angry, Elowen said quietly. But don't let it control you. Don't let her have that power over either of us. Cale stared at her for a long moment, then slowly unclenched his fists. You're wise beyond your years. I'm a survivor. There's a difference. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, and Elowen found herself relaxing. This wasn't like the formal dinners she'd imagined, stuffy affairs with dozens of courses and strict etiquette. This was just two people sharing a meal, finding their rhythm. Can I ask you something? Elowen ventured. Anything. The mate bond. You said it snapped into place the moment I shifted. But how does that work? How can a bond form with someone you don't know? Cale set down his fork, considering his words. The bond isn't about knowing someone intellectually. It's about recognition at a soul level. Your wolf and mine, they recognized each other as perfect complements. The bond is, imagine two pieces of a puzzle that fit together so perfectly, you can't see the seam. But what if the pieces don't want to fit together? Elowen challenged. What if one piece wants to be separate? Then the bond aches. Cale's voice was soft. For both parties. It doesn't force anything. You can reject the bond. I can reject the bond. But the rejection causes pain. A constant awareness of what could have been. Have you felt that? The ache? Every moment you're not close, Cale admitted. It's like a low hum of discomfort. Not unbearable, but persistent. It gets better when we're together, worse when we're apart. He met her eyes. I don't tell you that to guilt you into staying. I tell you so you understand what you're considering. The bond isn't just mystical destiny, it has real, physical effects. Elowen thought about the pull she'd felt, the way her body had responded when they touched. I feel it too. The pull. It scares me. Why? Because I don't trust it. Elowen set down her own fork. How do I know what I'm feeling is real? How do I know it's not just biology manipulating me into accepting something I'd never choose otherwise? You don't, Cale said honestly. Not for certain. But I can tell you what my mother told me about her bond with my father. She said the mate bond didn't create love, it created opportunity. A foundation of compatibility that could become love if both people chose to nurture it. Did they? Nurture it? Every day. Cale's expression was distant, caught in memory. They had arguments, disagreements. but they chose each other every morning, chose to work through problems instead of walking away. The bond made the connection possible, but they made it real. Eowyn absorbed this, turning it over in her mind. And if I reject the bond, what happens to you? I survive. Cale's voice was steady. It'll hurt. Probably for a long time. But I'll survive. I survived losing my mother, losing my father. I'll survive losing you too, if that's what you choose. The casual way he said it, like his pain was inconsequential compared to her freedom, made Eowyn's throat burn with unshed tears. I don't want to hurt you, she whispered. I know. Cale reached across the table, stopping just short of touching her hand. But I want you to be free more than I want to be pain-free. That's what love is, Eowyn. Choosing someone else's happiness over your own comfort. You don't love me, Eowyn protested. You can't. We barely know each other. You're right. I don't love you. Yet. Cale's golden eyes held hers. But I could. I can feel the potential there, like a seed waiting for water, and that's terrifying and thrilling all at once. A knock interrupted them, sharp and urgent. Enter. Cale called, tension immediately flooding his body. Commander Lyris stepped in, her expression grim. Your Majesty, we have a situation. Magistra Elena needs you in the council chamber immediately. What happened? A delegation arrived. 6 alphas representing the Southern Alliance. They're demanding an audience. Lyris's eyes flicked to Eowyn. They're demanding to see the Prime Omega. They want proof she exists, and proof of the mate bond. Cale stood, his entire demeanor shifting to the Alpha King. Tell them I'll meet them in 20 minutes. And Lyris? Double the guard on Eowyn's quarters. No one gets within 50 feet without my explicit permission. Already done. After Lyris left, Cale turned to Eowyn. I'm sorry. I wanted tonight to be peaceful. It's fine. Eowyn stood as well, though her legs felt unsteady. What's the Southern Alliance? 6 of the most powerful packs in the Southern Territories. They've been lobbying for more autonomy, more independence from royal authority. Cale's jaw clenched. This is a power play. They're using your existence as leverage. Against you? Against everyone. He moved closer, and this time he did take her hand. The touch sent warmth flooding through her. Eowyn, the next few days are going to be politically complicated. There will be challenges, demands, people trying to use you as a pawn. I need you to trust that I won't let anyone hurt you. I do, Eowyn said, and realized with surprise that she meant it. Trust you, I mean. The hope that blazed across Cale's face was almost painful to witness. Then hold on to that. No matter what happens, no matter what they say or demand, remember that I'm on your side. He left, and Eowyn was escorted back to her chambers by Tobias and 4 armed guards. Once inside, she moved to the windows and looked out over the glittering city. Somewhere out there, 6 alphas were plotting, using her existence as a weapon in their political games. And in 2 days, she'd have to make a choice that would affect not just her life, but the balance of power in the entire Northern Territories. No pressure. Eowyn touched the glass, her silver marks faintly visible in the reflection, and wondered if running away would really be so cowardly, or if staying might actually be the bravest thing she'd ever done. Chapter 6. The Southern Alliance's Challenge. The council chamber was enormous, a circular room with towering ceilings, walls lined with silver filigree depicting scenes from wolf history. At the center sat an oval table carved from obsidian, with Cale at the head, and his advisors flanking him on either side. Eowyn stood to his right, still in her blue dress, trying to look confident despite the trembling in her hands. 6 alphas sat across from them, their power radiating through the room like oppressive heat. The leader, a broad-shouldered man with obsidian skin and silver-threaded hair, smiled at Eowyn with teeth that held no warmth. Alpha King Nightborn, he began, his voice smooth as silk over steel. I am Alpha Zarek of the Sunfire Pack. We appreciate you accommodating our impromptu visit. His eyes shifted to Eowyn. Though I must say, the rumors don't do the Prime Omega justice. Such remarkable markings. Flattery, Alpha Zarek? Magistra Elena's voice cut through the room like a blade. How unexpected. Not flattery. Observation. Zarek leaned back in his chair. We've traveled far to confirm the rumors, to ensure that what we've heard is true. And what have you heard? Cale's tone was casual, but Elowen felt the dangerous edge beneath it. That you've found your mate, that she's Prime Omega, that you've been keeping her hidden in the capital. Another alpha, younger, with restless energy, spoke up. We want to see the bond marks. The bond isn't complete yet, Cale said smoothly, but the marking will come in time. How convenient, the youngest alpha observed, his voice dripping with mockery. An alpha king with a mate that no one has actually seen marked. We have only your word. Elowen felt Cale tense beside her. My word as alpha king is enough. Is it? Zarek leaned forward, his dark eyes calculating. Because we were wondering if perhaps this Prime Omega wasn't actually your mate at all. Perhaps she's just a convenient fiction, a way to maintain control of the territories without actually binding yourself through the mate bond. The audacity of the accusation hung in the air like poison. That's an interesting theory, Elena said icily. Do you have evidence to support it? We have skepticism, Zarek replied. And skepticism suggests we should verify the claim. The Prime Omega should be tested, proven genuine. Tested how? Cale's voice was deadly calm. The traditional way. Zarek gestured, and one of his guards produced a vial filled with dark red liquid. Prime Omega blood is unique. It should react to wolf essence in a specific way, creating a temporary amplification bond that allows others to sense her true power. Absolutely not, Cale said flatly. There is no traditional test. You're making this up as you go along. Then you're afraid of the test, Zarek observed, which suggests she's not what you claim. Elowen watched the play unfold. The careful manipulation, the insinuation that Cale was lying or hiding something. The Southern Alliance wasn't trying to harm her. They were trying to undermine Cale's authority. If they could prove he'd lied about finding his mate, they could potentially challenge his right to rule. She understood politics now, had learned about power dynamics in the last hours of observation, and she understood that Cale was caught in a trap of his own making. If he refused the test, he looked guilty. If he submitted, he was accepting their authority over royal matters. Before Cale could respond, Elowen stepped forward. I'll do it, she said quietly. Absolutely not, Cale snapped, grabbing her arm gently. You don't know what that test entails. No, Elowen interrupted, meeting his golden eyes. But I know that refusing makes you look weak. And I know that the Southern Alliance is counting on your protectiveness overriding your political judgment. She turned to Zarek. What exactly does the test involve? Zarek's smile widened. Wise girl, very wise. He gestured to his guard again. The blood of a true Prime Omega, when mixed with wolf essence, will amplify the connection temporarily. We'll all feel your power through the bond. No deception possible. And if she refuses to do it afterward? Magistra Elena asked carefully. If the test confirms she's Prime, but proves the mate bond false? Then the Alpha King is a liar, Zarek said simply, and his authority should be questioned. Unacceptable, Commander Lyris said, her hand dropping to her sword. Any suggestion that the Alpha King is unfit will be met with, "It's fine," Elowen said, surprising everyone. "I'm not afraid of being tested, and I'm not afraid of the truth being known." She looked directly at Cale. "Because the truth is that we are bonded, and if these alphas need proof, I'll give it to them." Cale studied her face for a long moment, and she saw the war playing out behind his golden eyes. The alpha who wanted to protect her warring with the king who needed to maintain authority. The king won. "Proceed," he said quietly, but carefully. "The Prime Omega is under my protection, and any harm that comes to her will be considered an act of war." Zarek produced a silver bowl and poured the dark red liquid into it. It looked like blood, but thicker, more viscous. "Just a small amount of your blood, my dear, added to this mixture. The effect should be immediate." "I don't." Elowen moved to the bowl before she could second-guess herself. She pricked her finger on a needle one of Zarek's guards offered, and let 3 drops of blood fall into the mixture. The reaction was immediate and violent. The liquid began to glow, first faint, then blindingly bright, a brilliant gold light that pulsed like a heartbeat. The glow spread outward, and Elowyn felt it, the connection to every wolf in the room suddenly vivid and clear. She could sense their power, their nature, their dominance hierarchies, could feel them sensing her. Her marks began to glow in response, the silver lines blazing with that same golden light. The power thrummed through her, ancient and overwhelming, and Elowyn understood suddenly why alphas would go to war over a prime omega. This power, this presence, it was intoxicating. The glow faded slowly, and Elowyn gasped, suddenly aware of how much of her energy the display had cost. Cale caught her as her knees threatened to buckle, pulling her against his chest, his hand protective over her marks. "There," he said coldly. "Your proof. She's prime. The bond is real." His voice was pure alpha command. "And if I hear even a whisper of doubt about either fact, I will personally visit each of your territories and remind you why the Northern Territories are united under my rule." Silence filled the council chamber. Then Zarek slowly applauded. "Remarkable. Truly remarkable." He stood, and the other Southern Alphas followed. "We are satisfied, Alpha King. The Prime Omega is exactly what you claim." He bowed a gesture that managed to be both respectful and insulting. "We look forward to the formal claiming ceremony. The Southern Alliance would like to send a representative as a gift, to show our support." "Your support is noted and appreciated," Cale said coldly. "But unnecessary. The claiming will be private." "Private?" Zarek looked almost disappointed. "How unusual. Such an important ceremony, and the territories won't be invited to celebrate." "The ceremony will be private," Cale repeated, his tone brooking no argument. "When the time comes." The Southern Alphas departed with promises of future cooperation that sounded distinctly threatening. The moment they were gone, Cale guided Elowyn to a chair and lowered her into it. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his hands running over her arms, her shoulders, checking for damage. "Did that test cause you pain?" "I'm just tired," Elowyn said honestly. Her marks had faded back to their usual faint silver, and exhaustion pressed against her like a physical weight. "What was that? What happened?" "Prime Omega manifestation," Magistra Elena explained, moving to offer Elowyn a glass of water. "The blood test isn't traditional. Zarek was lying about that, but it works as a sort of catalyst. It forced your power to the surface, amplified it enough that every alpha in the room could sense your true nature without question." "That was dangerous," Cale said quietly, fury underlying each word. "I should never have allowed it." "I'm fine," Elowyn said, drinking the water gratefully. "And it worked. They believe me now." "It worked too well," Elena said thoughtfully. "Zarek will be reporting back to the other Southern Alphas. Word will spread that the Prime Omega's power is as significant as legend suggests." She paused. "This changes things politically. Some Alphas will see you as a threat, others as a potential ally. Still, others will try to use you as leverage." "Use me how?" Elowyn asked. "By kidnapping you," Lyris said bluntly. "By forcing you to bear their offspring in hopes of inheriting Prime Omega strength. By challenging Cale directly for the right to claim you." She looked at Cale. "Security needs to be tripled. Maybe quadrupled." "Agreed," Cale said darkly. "And I want Elowyn confined to the royal quarters when I'm not present. No leaving the palace. No exceptions." That's not necessary," Elowyn protested. "It is necessary," Cale said fiercely. "You just demonstrated your power to 6 of the most ambitious alphas in the territories. They're going to be planning how to use that power before they even reach their packs. The safest place for you right now is here, where I can protect you." Elowyn wanted to argue, but the exhaustion was overwhelming. The blood test had taken something from her, some essential energy that left her feeling hollow. "Take her to her quarters," Cale instructed one of the guards. "And maintain constant watch. No one approaches without my explicit permission." "Yes, Your Majesty," the guard responded. As Elowyn was led away, she looked back at Cale. He was already deep in discussion with Elena and Lyris, planning responses and security measures. The Alpha King had returned, replacing the man who'd shared dinner with her just hours before. In her quarters, Elowyn collapsed on the luxurious bed, fully clothed, and fell into a sleep so deep it was almost like drowning. She woke to darkness and the sensation of being watched. Elowen's newly awakened wolf howled in alarm, and she scrambled for the lamp, her hands glowing faintly with defensive power. The figure in the shadows resolved into Cale. He wore dark clothes, and his expression was carefully neutral. "I'm sorry for startling you. I needed to see you." Elowen's heart hammered against her ribs. "It's the middle of the night. I know." He moved closer, and she saw the tension in his shoulders, the predatory grace of his movements. "The bond is aching. It's gotten worse since you collapsed. I needed to confirm you were all right." Elowen sat up, suddenly aware of how close they were in the darkness, how intimate the moment felt. "I'm fine, just tired from the test." "You did something incredibly brave today," Cale said quietly. "And incredibly foolish. You could have been hurt, but I wasn't. This time." He sat on the edge of the bed, creating distance between them, but not much. "But there will be other challenges, other tests, other alphas trying to prove you're not what you claim, and I can't protect you from all of it." "Then teach me," Elowen said. "To protect myself, to understand my power, to navigate this world." She paused. "And to understand what this bond means, not as a destined mate, but as a choice, as something I'm actively deciding." Cale's golden eyes burned in the darkness. "Are you deciding? I'm considering," Elowen said carefully. "But I need more than 3 days. I need to understand who I am outside of this bond, outside of everyone's expectations. Then take the time you need." Cale reached out, and when she didn't pull away, he took her hand gently. The bond pulsed between them, warm and alive. "But know that I'm all in, Elowen. However long it takes. Whatever you need to feel safe and sure. Even if I leave?" she asked quietly. "Even if I decide this isn't what I want? Even then?" His voice carried the weight of a promise forged in blood and conviction. "I would rather lose you forever than trap you for even one moment." He stood to leave, but Elowen tightened her grip on his hand. "Stay, just for tonight. I don't want to be alone." Relief flooded across Cale's face. He removed his dark outer clothes, keeping on his shirt and pants, and lay down beside her on the massive bed, not touching, maintaining careful distance, but close enough that she could feel his warmth. "Thank you," Elowen whispered. "For what?" "For not forcing it, for giving me a choice." In the darkness, she heard him smile. "That's what love does, Elowen. It gives the other person the freedom to leave and praise they choose to stay." They fell asleep like that, not touching but connected. The bond humming softly between them like a lullaby. And for the first time in her life, Elowen slept without nightmares. Chapter 7. The Second Trial. Elowen woke alone in the massive bed, but the depression in the pillow beside her proved Cale had been there. Morning light streamed through the windows, and she could hear activity in the palace courtyard below, voices. The sound of horses, the general bustle of a kingdom running. A note lay on the table beside the bed, written in elegant script. "Elowen, had to attend to border disputes in the Eastern Territories. Should be back by evening. In my absence, Magistra Elena will oversee your training. She's terrifying but brilliant, and I trust her completely. The bond will ache while I'm gone. That's normal. It means we're separated. Don't fight it, just acknowledge it and breathe through it. I'll be counting the hours until I see you again. K." Elowen read the note 3 times, then pressed it against her chest. The mate bond was aching, a low, persistent discomfort that lived in her sternum like a heartache. She wondered if Cale was feeling the same thing somewhere in the Eastern Territories, or if the bond affected them differently. A knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Mara entered carrying fresh clothes, training gear in soft leather and reinforced fabric. "Magistra Elena is ready for you whenever you are," Mara said cheerfully. "She's set up in the training grounds. Fair warning, she's demanding, but she gets results." The training grounds occupied a massive courtyard behind the palace, shaded by ancient oak trees and surrounded by high stone walls. Magistra Elena stood in the center wearing practical clothes, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a tight braid. She was smaller than Elowen had realized at the dinner. Probably only average height for a woman, but she carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd never questioned their own power. "Elowen." Elena greeted her, offering a small smile. "Glad you could join me." We have a lot to cover and limited time to cover it. Cale said you'd oversee my training, Elowen said, suddenly uncertain. But train me in what? Everything. Elena gestured to the open space. Your wolf is 16 years old but has never been used. That means she's strong but untrained. We need to address that before word spreads about your power and every ambitious alpha in the territories decides to test you. The king already said I'd be confined to the palace. The king is being protective and foolish. Elena interrupted, not unkindly. Keeping you confined might prevent challenges, but it also makes you dependent and visible. Better to train you to defend yourself. Better to show strength than hide it. Elena walked closer, studying Elowen with those sharp intelligence-filled eyes. First, let's see what we're working with. Shift. Partial shift, the way you did in the forest. Elowen hesitated, then reached inward for her wolf. The connection came easily now, much easier than before. She felt the animal stir, stretch, awaken. Power flooded through her. That sensation of becoming more than human, of accessing strengths she'd never imagined. The transformation took only seconds. Her bones didn't crack this time, didn't scream with the pressure of change. Instead, it was almost smooth, her body stretching and reshaping itself into something new. When she looked down, her hands had become claws again, her skin marked with those familiar silver patterns. But this time, she maintained her human form from the waist up, her face still recognizable, her voice still human. Good, Elena said approvingly. Very smooth transition. Most wolves your age take minutes to manage that. You're a natural. She paused. Now, can you shift back? The reverse transformation was even easier. Elowen found herself human again, breathing hard but not exhausted. The training she hadn't realized she was doing was paying off. Excellent, Elena said. Now the real work. Combat. For the next 6 hours, Elena taught Elowen how to fight. Not the crude brawling Elowen had learned growing up, desperate, instinctive violence born of survival. This was martial arts. Structured, tactical, precise. Elena herself demonstrated moving with a grace that belied her age, showing Elowen how to use leverage instead of strength, how to predict an opponent's moves, how to turn an attacker's power against them. The mistake most alphas make, Elena explained, sweat dripping down her face after a particularly intense demonstration, is assuming physical dominance equals combat superiority. But a clever fighter can take down a stronger opponent by understanding biomechanics and psychology. They sparred gently at first, Elena not using her full strength, just showing Elowen how to move, how to respond. But gradually, Elena increased the intensity, started fighting with real effort. Elowen was shocked to discover she could almost keep up. Her wolf gave her instincts, reflexes, strength beyond what her human body should allow. Combined with Elena's tactical teaching, she found herself actually landing hits. Better, Elena said, breathing hard. Much better. Again. By the time they finished, Elowen was covered in sweat and minor bruises, her muscles screaming with exhaustion. But she was also exhilarated. She'd never felt strong before. Never had anyone teach her skills instead of just demanding obedience. Water, Elena commanded, and servants appeared with fresh fruit, bread, and water that Elowen drank like her life depended on it. How long have you been training? Elowen asked. 40 years, Elena said, settling onto a bench. I was never going to be alpha material. My wolf is strong but not strong enough. So I made myself valuable in other ways. Combat training, political strategy, diplomatic negotiation. She smiled. I'm probably more powerful than half the alphas in this territory, just not in the way they understand power. Is that why you advise Cale? Partially, mostly because he trusts me, and I've earned that trust through years of good counsel and unwavering loyalty. Elena studied Elowen. Speaking of which, how are you feeling about him? Elowen was quiet for a moment. Confused. He's not what I expected an alpha to be. He's kind, but also strong. And he listens to me, actually listens, instead of just telling me what I should do. That's because he was raised right, Elena said thoughtfully. His mother was Omega, as you know. But she was also intelligent and respected. She taught Cale that power without wisdom is just violence. That alphas are supposed to protect and guide, not dominate and control. Elena's expression grew distant. When she died, I made it my mission to ensure he never forgot that lesson. Even when other alphas were pressuring him to be more ruthless. Do you think he loves me? Elowen asked suddenly, then immediately wanted to take the words back. Sorry, that's not inappropriate, Elena interrupted. It's a fair question. And the answer is no, not yet, but he's falling. I can see it in the way he looks at you, the way he moved heaven and earth to make sure you were safe yesterday. She stood, offering Elowen her hand. Come on, you need to shower and change before you attend the evening council meeting. I'm attending a council meeting? You are, Elena confirmed. And you need to be prepared. There will be more questions about your power, more challenges to Cale's authority. She guided Elowen toward the palace. The alphas know about your manifestation yesterday. Words already spread through the territories. By tomorrow, every major pack will know that Cale's mate is Prime Omega. Is that bad? Elowen asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. It's complicated, Elena said carefully. Good, because it strengthens Cale's position. A Prime Omega mate is unprecedented prestige. Bad, because every alpha without a mate is now going to be thinking about challenging for you, and every alpha with a mate is going to be worried about their partner's reaction to your existence. The evening council meeting was smaller than the one with the Southern Alliance, just Cale's inner circle, maybe a dozen people. Elena took a seat to Cale's right, and Elowen was placed to his left. Cale looked exhausted, his shoulders tense with strain. The moment his eyes found Elowen, some of the tension eased. He reached over and squeezed her hand briefly, a gesture that felt intimate and possessive at once. Report on the border dispute, he said, turning to a grizzled man Elowen recognized as one of the alphas from the first day. The Ironwood and Silvercrest packs have reached a compromise, the man reported. The tributary will be shared, fishing rights split equally. Both sides have agreed to the terms. Good, make it official. Cale turned to another advisor. Rogue activity? Still increasing in the south, a woman with scarred face reported. We've had 3 confirmed attacks on lone travelers, 2 incidents of rogues testing the borders of organized pack territory. Pattern suggests they're being coordinated. Coordinated? Cale's head snapped up. Rogues don't coordinate. They're solitary hunters. These are different, the woman insisted. There's intelligence behind their movements. I suspect someone's organizing them. A heavy silence fell over the council chamber. Any suspects? Cale asked quietly. The Southern Alliance, Elena said flatly. Using rogue attacks to destabilize the southern territories, so they have justification to expand their influence. That's speculation, one of the younger advisors protested. We have no proof. We will, Elena said coldly. Give me 2 weeks and I'll have documentation of the Alliance's involvement. Cale looked at Elowen, and she felt the weight of his attention. You're wondering why I'm mentioning this. I am, Elowen admitted. I don't see how rogue activity in the south affects me. It doesn't, directly, Cale said. But politically, it complicates everything. If the Southern Alliance is destabilizing their own territories, it means they're planning something bigger. Likely a challenge to my authority. How do they benefit from that? Elowen asked. You're the Alpha King. Challenging you is suicide. Not if they believe they can win, Elena said quietly. And if they have something that would give them the advantage. She stopped, but everyone in the room understood what she meant. Prime Omega. If the Southern Alliance could capture or turn Elowen, they could use her power to challenge Cale. Her presence would amplify an Alpha's strength, could potentially give someone enough power to compete with Cale's own formidable abilities. Elowen felt sick. They're going to try to take me. Yes, Cale said flatly. Which is why security is being increased further. Elena's already enhanced the training program. And I'm implementing a new policy: you don't leave the palace without at least 10 guards, and you travel in sealed carriages. That's not a life, Elowen said quietly. That's imprisonment. Temporary imprisonment, Cale said. Until we can neutralize the threat. And how long will that take? As long as necessary, Elena said. The Southern Alliance is powerful, but they're not infallible. We have advantages they don't. What advantages? Elowen demanded. Me, Cale said simply. Loyalty from the other territories, and you. I'm not a weapon, Elowen said fiercely, surprising herself with her vehemence. I'm not a tool to be used in your political games. I know that, Cale said gently. But you are a factor in this equation, whether you choose to be or not. Your existence is political now, your safety is strategic. Your power is a variable that every alpha in the territories is calculating. The words were honest, but they hit like blows. Everything Elena had been teaching her, everything Cale had been saying about choice and freedom, it all felt suddenly hollow. I need air, Elowen said, standing abruptly. I need to get out of here. Elowen, Cale reached for her, but she pulled away. She left the council chamber and practically ran through the palace corridors. Guards tried to follow her, but she was faster than them in her anger. She found herself on a balcony overlooking the city, her hands glowing with barely contained power. Cale appeared a few minutes later, alone. I'm sorry, he said immediately. I should have warned you before the meeting. Should have prepared you for what you'd hear. I'm not angry at you, Elowen said, though she was. Just not only at him. She was angry at the world, at the circumstances that had trapped her in this role, at the fact that her existence could be weaponized simply by being what she was. I'm angry at all of it. I wanted to have time to figure out who I am and what I want. Instead, I'm trapped in this palace while alphas plot and scheme and try to figure out how to use me. Then leave, Cale said quietly. Elowen turned to look at him. What? Leave. He stepped closer, his golden eyes sincere. I meant what I said in my letter. I mean what I've been saying all along. If you want to go, I'll help you. I'll provide resources, protection, whatever you need. But you'd lose the political advantage, Elowen said. Having me here, bonded to you, strengthens your position. Yes, Cale admitted. But it also breaks my soul a little bit every time I see you trapped and unhappy. He reached out, and this time Elowen let him take her hand. My mother used to tell me that love is choosing someone else's freedom over your own comfort. I didn't really understand until I met you. Elowen studied his face, the exhaustion, the genuine conflict between what he wanted and what he knew was right. I don't want to leave. Relief flooded across his features. No, Elowen said. But I want to be more than just your protected mate. I want to be part of the solution, not just part of the problem. What do you suggest? Elowen turned back to look at the city spread below them, lights beginning to twinkle as evening turned to night. I want to know what the Southern Alliance is planning. I want to help you stop them, and I want to do it as your partner, not your possession. Cale was quiet for a long moment, then he pulled her close, his hand gentle against her marks. Elena was right about you. You're going to change everything. Is that bad? Elowen asked, resting her head against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart and the hum of the mate bond. No, Cale said. It's just what I've been waiting for. A reason to believe that things could be different. That power doesn't have to come with cruelty. That strength can coexist with compassion. They stood like that as the city lights multiplied, as stars emerged in the darkening sky, as the bond between them hummed and strengthened with each shared breath. Elowen still didn't know if she loved him, didn't know if what she felt was genuine choice or biology manipulating her, but she knew she wanted to find out. And that, she was beginning to realize, might be enough for now. Chapter 8. The Conspiracy Revealed. The war room was located deep beneath the palace, a chamber carved from living rock, lined with maps and tactical displays showing troop movements across all the territories. Elowen had been summoned before dawn, when the city above was still sleeping, and told to tell no one where she was going. Elena was already there, along with Cale and a handful of trusted advisors Elowen hadn't met before. The table in the center was covered with documents, correspondence, payment records, troop manifests, evidence. The Southern Alliance isn't just destabilizing the South. Elena began without preamble, pointing to a series of marked locations on the map. They're positioning rogue packs strategically, here, here, and here, all within striking distance of major trade routes. They've been paying the rogues with supplies and coordination. For what purpose? One of the advisors asked. Control, Elena said flatly. If they can disrupt enough trade, cause enough chaos, they create justification for military intervention. They claim the central authority, meaning Cale, is failing to maintain order, and they step in to restore stability in their territories. From there, it's a short jump to claiming that their intervention should extend to other regions. A slow-moving coup, the advisor realized. Exactly. Elena turned to Cale. But that's not the worst part. According to the documents we intercepted, they have a secondary plan if the slow approach doesn't work. She pulled out a sealed letter, its wax broken, its contents exposed. Elowen leaned forward to read. The Prime Omega represents an unprecedented opportunity. If we can secure her cooperation or her body. If cooperation proves impossible, we gain leverage for direct challenge. An alpha with Prime Omega amplification could potentially match the King's power. We estimate 67% probability of victory in direct combat. Recommend expedited timeline. Move within the lunar cycle. Elowen's blood went cold. They're planning to kidnap me. Within 28 days, Elena confirmed. They've probably already positioned operatives in the capital. They're waiting for an opportunity, either a moment when your security lapses, or they'll create one by staging some kind of diversion. How do we stop them? Elowen asked. We could execute them, one of the advisors suggested grimly. Send forces south, crush the Alliance before they can act. That starts a war we might not win, another advisor countered. The other southern pacts aren't explicitly aligned with the Alliance. Open aggression could push them toward supporting the challenge. Cale was quiet, his jaw clenched, his golden eyes distant as he processed information. Elowen could see the weight settling on his shoulders, the burden of leadership, the knowledge that whatever decision he made would cost lives. There's a third option, Elena said quietly. We could bait them. Everyone turned to look at her. Explain, Cale said. We let them think they're succeeding, Elena said. We arrange an accident where Elowen's security appears compromised. Not actually compromised, but staged convincingly enough that the Alliance operatives believe the opportunity has come. They move to capture her. We catch them in the act, arrest the operatives, trace the orders back to the Alliance leadership, and if something goes wrong? Cale's voice was dangerous. If the staged capture becomes real? It won't, Elena said with absolute certainty, because Elowen will be surrounded by our best warriors the entire time. The Alliance operatives won't even know they're being herded. All eyes turned to Elowen. She understood immediately what they were asking. You want me to be the bait, she said. Yes, Elena confirmed. But only if you're willing. This is your decision. I won't force it. Elowen looked at Cale, expecting him to object, to refuse, to protect her at all costs. But instead, she saw understanding in his expression. Respect. The acknowledgement that she was capable of choosing her own path. What would I have to do? Elowen asked. Elena outlined the plan. For the next week, security around Elowen would gradually appear to relax. Her routes would become predictable. She'd be seen visiting the market with fewer guards. A pattern would emerge, one that suggested vulnerability. The Alliance operatives would see the opportunity and move. And when they did, they'd find themselves surrounded by warriors trained and equipped to handle whatever they threw at them. The risk is minimal, Elena assured her. But it's not zero. There's always a chance of an unexpected variable. There's also a chance they don't fall for it, another advisor said. They're not stupid. If they've infiltrated the capital, they'll be watching for traps, which is why Elowen has to sell it, Elena said. She has to genuinely believe she's vulnerable, has to act like someone who's starting to feel trapped and looking for escape. Elowen understood what that meant. She'd have to convince Cale at least convincingly enough that her anxiety would read as genuine. She'd have to live with uncertainty for a week, knowing that capture might be coming, knowing that danger was real even if the outcome was planned. I'll do it, she said. Elowen, Cale began. You taught me that I deserved agency, Elowen interrupted, meeting his golden eyes. That I deserved to be part of the solution, not just protected from the problem. This is how I'm choosing to be part of the solution. Cale stared at her for a long moment. Then he reached across the table and took her hand. "You're either the bravest person I know, or completely insane." "Probably both," Elowen said. Elena smiled grimly. "Then we're agreed. We implement the plan." The next 7 days were the longest of Elowen's life. During the day, she acted her part, gradually venturing further from the palace, accepting Cale's suggestion that her constant confinement was making her anxious. She asked for more freedom, pushed against boundaries, made it clear she was starting to chafe under protection. It wasn't entirely an act. At night, she and Cale made love not because they were mated, but because they needed connection, physical proof that despite everything, they were choosing each other. And each time, Elowen felt the bond strengthen, felt the possibility of genuine love growing beneath the surface attraction. "I'm scared," she admitted one night, lying in the darkness of Cale's chambers. "I know," he said, pulling her closer. "But you're safe. Even when it doesn't feel like it, you're safe." "What if the plan doesn't work?" Elowen asked. "What if something goes wrong and they actually manage to take me?" "Then I burn the world to get you back," Cale said simply. "Every territory, every pack, every alpha who stands between us. I would level the entire civilization to retrieve you." The possessiveness should have frightened her. Instead, it felt like being grounded, like knowing that even in the worst-case scenario, someone would fight for her. By the 7th day, tension was at a breaking point. Elowen's anxiety was genuine now the staging had become real. She truly was nervous, truly was vulnerable to the possibility of capture. Elena had secured the final piece of the trap that morning, a message intercepted from Alliance leadership. "Operation begins tomorrow. Primary window is the market visit at noon." At 11:45 a.m., Elowen entered the palace market dressed in simple clothes with minimal guards, just two, both undercover in merchant garb, both secretly warriors trained by Elena herself. More guards were positioned throughout the market, disguised as shopkeepers and customers. Elowen browsed the stalls, jewelry, fabrics, fresh produce. Tried to look like just another person in the crowd, though her silver marks glowed faintly with stress beneath her long sleeves. At exactly 12:10 p.m., she felt the shift in the air. The presence of other wolves, moving with predatory coordination. The operatives, there were 5 of them, 2 men, 3 women, all built like warriors, all moving to circle her with precision. They wore no uniforms, no identifying marks, just wolves, in human form, ready to strike. One of them stepped forward, and Elowen recognized the face from the interrogation reports. Marcus, one of the Alliance's most trusted operatives. "Prime Omega," he said, his voice carrying just enough to be heard over the market noise but not enough to alarm the civilians. "You're coming with us. Don't fight, and no one gets hurt." This was it. The moment of truth. Elowen had been trained to fight, but she was also supposed to play scared. To seem like she might resist, but ultimately recognizing that she was outnumbered. She started to back away, her eyes wide, her marks beginning to glow brighter as she accessed her wolf. "No, I'm not. Now," Marcus commanded. Elena's trap sprang. Guards emerged from every direction, swords and weapons at the ready, but they didn't immediately attack. Instead, they created a barrier between Elowen and the operatives, pressing inward, slowly shrinking the space where Marcus and his team could operate. Marcus's face went pale as he realized the trap. He looked at the other operatives, clearly assessing options. They were outnumbered 5-1, and they'd been caught mid-operation. "I assume you have a message you'd like us to carry back to your leadership?" Elena asked, stepping forward with a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. Marcus made a split-second decision. He grabbed for Elowen anyway, probably thinking that taking her hostage was better than nothing. Elena moved faster than thought. She caught his wrist, twisted it into an angle that made him scream, and disarmed him of the dagger he'd been hiding. The other operatives surged forward, trying to fight their way through the guards. It lasted maybe 3 minutes. By the end, Marcus and his team were restrained, their weapons removed, their communication crystals confiscated. They'd fought hard, but ultimately well-trained royal guards prevailed. Elowen stood shaking in the center of the chaos, her marks glowing brilliantly, her wolf prowling beneath her skin, demanding violence and vengeance. "Easy," Elena said gently, appearing beside her. "You're safe now." The plan worked. They were going to take me, Elowen said, her voice hollow. They were, Elena agreed. But they didn't. And now we have evidence of their direct involvement. The operatives were marched away under heavy guard, and the market returned to something resembling normalcy. Elowen was escorted back to the palace by an even larger security contingent. Cale was waiting in the war room when they arrived. The moment he saw Elowen, he crossed the space in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms, his whole body shaking with barely contained fury and relief. "Are you hurt?" "No," Elowen said, burrowing against his chest. "It worked. The trap worked." "Get me a communication crystal," Cale ordered, his voice carrying the cold authority of a king about to go to war. "I want to send a message to the Southern Alliance leadership. They have 1 hour to dismantle their rogue operations and surrender the operatives to royal justice. If they refuse, we need to be strategic about this," Elena interrupted. "Harsh demands now will only drive them to open rebellion. We need leverage, something they can't counter." "We have leverage," Cale said darkly. "We have captured operatives who can testify about the Alliance's involvement in organizing rogue attacks. We have documentation of their conspiracy to kidnap the Prime Omega. We have everything we need." "And they'll know it's coming," Elena said. "They'll lawyer up, deny involvement, claim the operatives were acting independently. It becomes a political standoff." She paused. "Unless we give them a reason to cooperate voluntarily." "And what reason would that be?" Cale demanded. Elena smiled. "Amnesty. We offer them immunity for all prior crimes in exchange for full confession and cooperation to prevent future rogue activity." "Absolutely not," Cale snapped. "They plotted to destabilize my territories and kidnap my mate." "Not amnesty." "They do," Elena agreed. "But punishment won't solve the underlying problem. The reason the Alliance felt desperate enough to challenge you was because they saw the southern territories being destabilized and believed they could use that chaos to their advantage. If we offer them amnesty in exchange for dismantling the rogue networks they created and reorganizing the southern territories under cooperative rather than authoritarian oversight, we solve the political problem while also eliminating the military threat." Cale was quiet, wrestling with the logic of Elena's proposal. Finally, he turned to Elowen. "What do you think?" Elowen was surprised to be asked. "I think Elena's right. Punishment feels good, but amnesty solves more problems." She paused. "But they need to know there will be consequences if they betray the amnesty agreement. They need to understand that any future violation will result in total destruction." A slow smile crossed Cale's face. "You're right, both of you." He turned to his advisors. "Draft the amnesty proposal. Include the restructuring terms. The Southern Territories will receive equal representation in royal decisions, but in exchange, they pledge loyalty to the Crown and cooperation on security matters." "They'll see that as weakness," one advisor warned. "Let them see it however they want," Cale said. "In 3 months, when the rogue networks are dismantled and the Southern Territories are prosperous under cooperative governance, they'll understand it was strength. The strength to offer mercy and power sharing instead of just dominance." Elena nodded approvingly. "I'll draft the official proposal." As the council began debating terms and logistics, Cale pulled Elowen to the side. "I'm proud of you. You were incredibly brave out there." "I was terrified," Elowen admitted. "That's what makes bravery real," Cale said. "It's not the absence of fear, it's acting despite fear." He touched her marks gently. "You've changed the course of this entire situation. Without you, we'd be heading toward war. With you, we're heading toward peace." "I didn't do anything heroic," Elowen protested. "I just didn't run away when you asked me not to." "That's exactly what heroes do," Cale said softly. "They choose to stay. They choose to fight. They choose to believe that things can be better." He kissed her then, and it felt like a promise. Not just of protection, but of partnership, of genuine, chosen love building slowly beneath the bond. Elowen kissed him back, tasting possibility and future, and the terrifying realization that somewhere along the way, she'd stopped thinking about leaving. She wanted to stay, not because she had to, not because of the bond or the politics or the role, but because she chose to. Chapter 9. The Claiming Ceremony. 28 days. That's what the ancient wolf law demanded, 28 days from prime omega, awakening to when a claiming ceremony could officially take place. Elowyn had reached day 27, and the capital was in a state of controlled frenzy. Despite Cale's initial insistence on a private ceremony, word had spread. The Southern Alliance amnesty proposal had been accepted, which meant the political crisis was averted. The operatives had been tried and convicted, their testimony dismantling the conspiracy. And with the threat neutralized, the territories were eager to celebrate, which meant the private ceremony had evolved into something grander than Elowyn had imagined. The night before the claiming, Elowyn stood in the royal chambers, no longer the guest suite but Cale's actual bedroom, where she'd been sleeping for the past week, and stared at the dress that had been laid out for her. It was extraordinary. White silk that seemed to shimmer with its own light, embroidered with intricate patterns of wolves and stars and moons. A crown of silver and moonstone rested on the vanity, not heavy with gold like a king's crown, but delicate and beautiful. "You look terrified," Elena observed from the doorway. "I am terrified," Elowyn admitted. "This is permanent. Once the bond is marked, there's no going back." "There is," Elena said gently. "The bond can be severed, though it would pain both of you, but I don't think you want to sever it." "No," Elowyn said quietly. "I don't. That's what terrifies me. A month ago, I was in an orphanage scrubbing floors. Now I'm about to become queen, and I'm choosing it because I love him." She looked at Elena. "How did this happen?" "You met someone who saw your worth," Elena said simply. "And you let yourself be seen in return. That's all love ever is, two people choosing to be honest with each other." Mara entered, followed by other servants carrying combs and cosmetics and everything needed to prepare a bride. They worked with practiced efficiency, styling Elowyn's dark hair into an elaborate updo adorned with moonstone pins, applying makeup that enhanced her silver marks, helping her into the beautiful dress. When they finished, Elowyn barely recognized herself. She looked like royalty. She looked powerful. She looked like a queen. "Stunning," Mara breathed. "The king is going to lose his mind when he sees you." "I hope so," Elowyn said softly. The ceremony would take place in the Grand Hall, a massive chamber at the heart of the palace, its high ceilings supported by marble columns carved to look like wolves in mid-leap. Every major alpha in the territories had been invited, along with representatives from the human kingdoms that bordered wolflands. Thousands of people. Elowyn waited in an antechamber, trying to steady her breathing, trying not to think about all the eyes that would be on her, trying not to wonder what the girl from the orphanage would think of all this. Tobias appeared, looking nervous in his formal clothing. "It's time," he said. "Are you ready?" "No," Elowyn said honestly. "But I don't think I'll ever be ready. So I might as well do it anyway." The doors to the Grand Hall opened, and music swelled, a haunting melody played on instruments Elowyn didn't recognize. The crowd inside fell silent as she entered, walking down an aisle of white flowers toward where Cale waited. He stood in his formal robes, black and silver, adorned with the insignia of the Alpha King, a crown of black metal and moonstones on his dark head. The moment his golden eyes met hers, the bond flared between them, burning bright and hot and undeniable. His expression transformed wonder and desire and love all mingled together in a way that made her breath catch. Elowyn reached him, and Cale took her hands. They were warm, steady, secure. "Hi," he whispered, just for her. "Hi," she whispered back, and despite the thousands of witnesses, despite the weight of politics and position, it felt intimate, private, real. The ceremony master, an elderly wolf with silver hair and the bearing of ancient authority, stepped forward. "We gather to witness the claiming of Prime Omega Elowyn by Alpha King Cale. This bond, once marked, will join them in perpetuity unless both parties consent to severance." Cale turned to face Elowyn fully. "Elowyn, I offer you my loyalty, my protection, my love, and my partnership. I ask you to stand beside me as queen, not behind me as possession. I ask you to challenge me when I'm wrong and support me when I'm right. I ask you to build this future with me, not as duty but as choice." Elowyn's throat tightened with emotion. "I accept. I choose you, Cale. Not because of the bond or the crown or any of it. I choose you because you saw my worth when I couldn't see it myself. Because you gave me agency when you could have just dominated me. Because you love me even when I was terrified of what you were." She paused. "I want to stand beside you. As your partner, your equal, your queen." The ceremony master nodded. "Then proceed with the marking." Cale leaned down, his fangs extending as his wolf rose close to the surface. He bit gently at Elowen's shoulder, just above her heart, marking her with the seal of his claim. The pain was sharp but brief, followed immediately by pleasure that made her gasp. At the same moment, Elowen reached up and found the junction of Cale's neck and shoulder. She let her fangs extend, experiencing the sensation of her wolf rising fully into her consciousness, and marked him in return. The moment her fangs broke his skin, the bond snapped. It was like lightning, like fire, like every nerve in her body suddenly connecting to his. She could feel his emotions, his joy, his relief, his overwhelming love. Could feel his thoughts in a vague way, not words, but intentions and feelings, and deep certainty. The marks appeared simultaneously, silver on Elowen's skin, dark on Cale's, both bearing the seal of their union. The grand hall erupted in applause and cheers. Wolves howled from outside the palace, their voices carrying across the capital in celebration. But Elowen barely heard it. All her focus was on Cale, on the connection thrumming between them, on the realization that she was no longer half of anything. She was whole, they were whole. "I love you," Cale said, his voice rough with emotion. "I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this choice." "I love you too," Elowen whispered, and meant it with every fiber of her being. They were presented to the crowd as the newly bonded pair, the Alpha King and his Prime Omega Queen. The ceremony continued with celebrations and feasts that lasted hours. But finally, mercifully, they were allowed to retire. In Cale's chambers, their chambers now, Elowen felt a sudden wave of shyness. The bond had eliminated physical distance, but emotional vulnerability was another matter entirely. "Second thoughts?" Cale asked, reading her hesitation easily through the bond. "No," Elowen said. "Just nervous. This is the first time I'm choosing intimacy because I want to, not because I'm obligated or forced." "Then we go slow," Cale said simply. He moved to her, carefully removing the crown from her hair, letting the elaborate updo begin to fall. "We go at your pace. We stop whenever you want to stop." They undressed each other slowly, reverently, taking time to explore the connection that the bond had created. And when they came together, it wasn't frantic or desperate. It was gentle and purposeful, and filled with mutual respect and genuine love. Elowen felt seen in a way she'd never experienced. Not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually. Cale knew her now in ways that went beyond physical attraction. He knew her fears, her hopes, her dreams, and he loved her anyway. Loved her because of those things. Afterward, they lay tangled together, her head on his chest, his hand stroking her marks. "Tell me something," Elowen said. "Something real." "I'm terrified," Cale admitted. "Of messing this up, of not being good enough, of failing you the way my father failed my mother by letting grief consume him." "You won't," Elowen said, "because you're aware of it, because you're willing to do the work." "Is that what love is?" Cale asked. "Awareness and work? For some people maybe. For us, I think it's awareness, work, and choosing each other every day despite the difficulty." She looked up at him. "My mother told me I was special before she died. I didn't understand what she meant. I thought she was just being a mother, offering comfort." Elowen paused. "But she was right. I was special, not because of my Omega nature or my marks or any of that, but because I was brave enough to let myself be loved." Cale kissed her forehead, and she felt his love flowing through the bond like a physical thing. "You're the strongest person I know." "I'm terrified," Elowen corrected. "I have no idea how to be a queen. I don't know royal protocol or politics or anything that's expected of me." "Then we learn together," Cale said. "Elena will help, and you have instincts. You proved that in the market. You're smarter than most alphas I know, braver than anyone I've met. The title of queen is just a formality. The real power is already inside you. Over the next 3 days, The reality of Elowen's new life began to sink in. There were meetings with advisors, lessons on protocol and history, introductions to diplomatic figures from all the territories. There were people constantly wanting something from her, a kind word, a blessing, a moment of her time. But there were also moments of genuine connection. A mother with a sick child who asked Elowen to bless her. A young wolf just awakened to her abilities who came for advice. A diplomat from a human kingdom who wanted to learn about wolf culture. Elowen found that she had a gift for listening, for understanding people beyond their titles and positions. She made decisions with fairness instead of ruthlessness, showed mercy when possible, and strength when necessary. Elena watched it all with satisfaction. "You're going to be a good queen," she said one evening. "Better than good. Exceptional." "I'm just doing what feels right," Elowen said. "That's exactly what makes a good leader," Elena replied. "You're not playing a role or following a script. You're being authentic, and people respond to that." On the evening of the third day, Elowen received a message. The orphanage had sent a delegation requesting an audience. Elowen's first instinct was to refuse, to pretend it didn't matter anymore. But she'd learned from Cale that running from the past didn't make it disappear. She agreed to meet them in a formal chamber, with guards present, with Cale at her side. Delphine entered looking smaller than Elowen remembered. Shabbier. Less terrifying. Beside her was Vivienne, her golden beauty somehow diminished by the harsh lighting of the palace. "Your Majesty," Delphine said, and the words sounded bitter coming from her mouth. "We've come to offer our congratulations on your claiming." Elowen studied the woman who had controlled her entire life for 16 years, and felt pity. Delphine was trapped in a small world of her own making, unable to see beyond her own limitations and cruelty. "Thank you for coming," Elowen said formally. "I hope the orphanage is well." "We wanted to," Vivienne started, then stopped. "We wanted to apologize for how we treated you." The words were clearly forced, offered because Elowen was now powerful, and it would be foolish to maintain enmity. Elowen could have taken satisfaction in this, in seeing her former tormentors brought low by her success. Instead, she felt nothing but sadness. "I forgive you," Elowen said quietly. "I forgave you the moment I chose to stop letting your cruelty define me." Delphine's face flushed with anger at this response. She'd been expecting to grovel or rage, but not this simple, genuine forgiveness that offered no satisfaction. "The orphanage will receive increased funding from the royal treasury," Elowen continued. "Not because you deserve it, but because children there need it. I want them to have better lives than I had. I want them to have choices." After they left, Cale pulled Elowen close. "That was generous. That was strategic," Elowen corrected. "If I acted like they'd hurt me, they'd win. If I acted like I'd forgotten them, I'd be lying. But forgiving them and moving forward, that's the only way to truly be free." Cale smiled against her hair. "My brilliant, wise, beautiful queen." That night, as they lay in bed together, Elowen felt the full weight of her new reality settle on her shoulders. She was queen. She had power beyond anything she'd imagined. She had love that felt like home. She had a purpose and a place in the world. But she also had responsibility. To the territories, to the people who would come to her with their problems and pain. To Cale, who was counting on her to be his partner through whatever challenges lay ahead. "What are you thinking about?" Cale asked, feeling her tension through the bond. "Everything," Elowen said. "It's all so much." "I know," he said. "But you don't have to handle it alone. That's what partners do, they share the burden." "I'm not going to be the kind of queen that people expect," Elowen warned. "I'm going to make mistakes. I'm probably going to do things that upset the traditional power structures." "Good," Cale said. "That's exactly what we need. Someone who comes from outside the system, who can see it clearly, who won't just perpetuate the old ways because that's how it's always been done." Elowen thought about the girl who'd been scrubbing floors just a month ago. That girl would never have believed this was possible, would never have imagined that kindness and courage could matter more than status or beauty or belonging to the right family. But that girl had been brave, had been willing to run into the unknown, had been willing to trust when trust seemed foolish. And that girl had been rewarded. "Thank you," Elowen whispered. For what? For seeing me. For giving me choices. For loving me not despite my scars and my history, but including them as part of what makes me valuable. Cale tightened his hold on her. Thank you for accepting me. For showing me that strength doesn't have to come with cruelty. For proving that a different way is possible. They held each other as the night deepened, connected by more than just the bond, connected by genuine, chosen, hard-won love. And somewhere in the capital, in the territories beyond, in the human kingdoms that bordered their lands, people were beginning to tell the story of the half-blood Omega who became queen, the girl who had nothing and won everything. The prime Omega who changed the course of history not through power but through the simple, radical act of choosing to be brave. The legend was just beginning. Subscribe if you believe Elowen's journey represents what we're all capable of transformation through courage and love. Because people like Elowen remind us that we're never as powerless as we think. Drop a comment. What do you think Elowen will do as queen? How will she change the territories? Chapter Gishinj, the new era. 6 months later, the Northern Territories had transformed in ways no one could have predicted. The rogue networks, once a destabilizing force threatening the entire region, had been absorbed into organized pack structures under a new initiative called the Redemption Program. Former rogues were given opportunities to integrate into society, training in trades, housing assistance, counseling for those traumatized by years of solitude. Some refused the offer and disappeared back into the wild, but many accepted, grateful for a second chance. The Southern Alliance, operating under the Amnesty Agreement, had become unexpected allies. With their rogue operations dismantled and cooperative governance structures in place, they'd discovered that prosperity came easier through collaboration than through conspiracy. Trade between regions had increased by 40%, conflicts between packs had dropped dramatically, and the territories themselves were flourishing. Elowen stood at the balcony of the royal palace, watching the city below, her hand resting on the subtle swell of her abdomen. The pregnancy had surprised them both. The mate bond apparently had its own timeline, but neither Cale nor Elowen had anything but joy about it. Still looking overwhelmed? Cale's voice came from behind her, followed by his arms wrapping around her, careful not to jostle her slightly expanded waist. Not overwhelmed, Elowen said softly. Just reflecting. 6 months ago, I was imprisoned in this palace, thinking I'd lost my freedom by accepting the bond. Now I'm about to bring a new life into a world that's actually better than it was. That's because of you, Cale said, kissing the top of her head. Every decision you've made, every policy you've pushed for, every act of mercy you've shown, it's all created this. It's all created this together, Elowen corrected. I couldn't have done any of it without you, without Elena, without our advisors willing to take risks. Still modest, Cale observed with affection. I'll never get used to that. You're the most powerful person in these territories, and you still sound surprised when anyone acknowledges your impact. Elowen smiled. The insecurity that had plagued her for 16 years had faded, but it hadn't disappeared entirely. Some wounds took longer to heal than others. Come, Cale said. There's someone who wants to meet you. He led her through the palace corridors to a smaller chamber, where Elena waited alongside a nervous young woman Elowen didn't recognize. The girl was maybe 17, with dark hair and frightened eyes, and silver marks that pulsed faintly beneath her skin. Another prime Omega? Elowen breathed. Not prime, Elena explained, but definitely significant. Omega born with rare empathic abilities. She was being held in a brutal pack structure where they were trying to force her into early bonding with an alpha who was abusing her. The girl flinched at the mention of abuse. Elowen moved slowly, carefully, remembering how frightened she'd been when Cale first appeared. What's your name? Lyra, the girl whispered. I'm Elowen, and I know what it's like to be treated as a possession instead of a person. She sat down, eye level with Lyra. I know what it's like to think your only options are suffering or death. But I'm here to tell you there's a third option. You get to choose. I don't have anywhere to go, Lyra said, tears streaming down her face. No family, no resources. If I leave, I'm a rogue or dead. You come here, Elowen said simply. You stay in the palace. You learn about your abilities, your power, your worth. And when you're ready, You decide what comes next. College, if you want to study. A craft, if you want to learn a trade. Or if you want to find your mate and build a life together, you do that too. But it will be your choice. Always your choice. Lyra stared at her like she couldn't quite believe what she was hearing. Really? Really? Elowen confirmed. We have a whole program now for wolves escaping abusive situations. Housing, education, counseling, and the territorial laws I pushed through make pack abuse illegal. If an alpha touches you without consent, we have authority to intervene. Elena smiled. Elowen's created quite a revolution in wolf society. Equal rights amendments, consent laws, education programs for young wolves regardless of status or ranking. The old alphas are furious, Cale added, but the younger generations are embracing it. They're tired of the hierarchical oppression. They want a society where strength doesn't automatically equal right. Will it work? Lyra asked. Can things really change? It's already changing, Elowen said. It's slow, and there's resistance, but it's happening. And every time an alpha chooses cooperation over domination, every time a pack chooses prosperity through collaboration instead of conquest, we prove that the old way wasn't inevitable. It was just the only way anyone could imagine. She reached out and took Lyra's hand. You're safe here, I promise you that. Over the following weeks, as Lyra settled into the palace, Elowen found herself mentoring the girl, teaching her that her abilities were gifts, not curses, that her empathic powers could help her connect with others deeply and meaningfully, that her omega nature made her valuable, not because it could be exploited, but because it represented a path toward building better pack structures. Meanwhile, Elowen's own pregnancy progressed, and she began to realize something profound. The child she was carrying would be born into a radically different world than the one she'd grown up in. The pup, whether male or female, alpha or omega, would have choices, would have agency, would have the right to refuse traditions that didn't serve them. One evening, she sat with Magistra Elena in the royal gardens, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Do you ever regret it? Elena asked. Taking on all this responsibility? You could have chosen to leave Cale, to live a quiet life somewhere far from politics. Every day, Elowen admitted. There are moments when I want to run away, when I'm overwhelmed by the weight of making decisions that affect millions of people. And yet you stay. I stay because leaving wouldn't free me, Elowen said thoughtfully. It would just be abandoning people who are counting on me, and I'd spend the rest of my life wondering if I could have made a difference. She touched her swollen belly. I'm bringing a new life into this world, and I want that life to exist in a place where people are treated with dignity and respect, where power comes with responsibility, instead of just privilege. Elena smiled. Your mother would be proud. I think so too, Elowen said softly. She still wore the moonstone pendant her mother had given her, the one that had contained the binding spell, the one that had locked her wolf away until the right moment. She'd had it reset into a necklace after her claiming, and she wore it always. She told me I was special, that when the time came, I'd understand. I think she meant this, that I'd understand what my power was really for, which is not domination, Elowen said, but transformation, change. She looked at Elena. When I first arrived in the capital, I was terrified of everything, terrified of Cale, terrified of my power, terrified that I didn't deserve any of this. But the truth is, we're all terrified. Every alpha, every omega, every creature with power, we're all scared that we'll mess up, that we'll let people down, that we're not good enough. So what's the solution? Elena asked, though Elowen suspected she already knew. Accepting the terror and moving forward anyway, Elowen said. Building systems that account for our imperfection. Creating spaces where people can ask for help instead of hiding their struggles. Showing that vulnerability is strength, not weakness. Elena reached over and squeezed Elowen's hand. You're going to be a legend, you know. Centuries from now, wolves will tell stories about the queen who rose from nothing and changed everything. I don't want to be a legend, Elowen said. I want to be a person who helped make things better. There's a difference. 3 months later, Elowen gave birth to twins, a son and a daughter. The boy was born with his father's dark hair and golden eyes, his power immediately recognizable, a strong alpha in the making. The girl was born with her mother's dark hair, and Elowen's silver marks already glowing faintly on her skin. Omega born with remarkable strength. Cale held them both, tears streaming down his face, completely overwhelmed. "We have to name them," Elowen said from the bed, exhausted but happy. "I want to name the boy Alistair," Cale said. "After my father. So he remembers what loss taught us about the importance of fighting for what matters." Elowen nodded. "And the girl? That's your choice," Cale said. "She should have her mother's legacy in her name." Elowen looked at her daughter, this new life, that represented everything Elowen had fought for. A female born into a world that would celebrate her strength instead of trying to contain it. Born into a society where her Omega nature would be honored and protected, not exploited. "Lyra," she said softly, after the first queen's sister in the old stories, the one who taught the Alpha King about mercy. "Lyra," Cale repeated, smiling at their daughter. "Perfect." The ceremony presenting the royal heirs to the territories was held a month later, when both children were stable, and Elowen had recovered enough to appear in public. The grand hall was packed again, just as it had been for Elowen's claiming, but the energy was different this time, not tense with political undercurrents, but genuinely joyful. Elowen stood beside Cale, cradling her children, and looked out at the assembled crowd. She saw representatives from all the territories, including some of the old alphas who'd initially resisted her policies, but she also saw young wolves, newly awakened to their abilities. Saw Lyra, standing with the other mentored Omegas, her face glowing with confidence that hadn't been there before. Saw families that had been reunited through the refugee reintegration programs. Saw hope. "Citizens of the Northern Territories," Cale's voice carried through the hall. "I present to you our heirs. Alistair, future Alpha, and Lyra, future Prime Omega, or at least, Prime-born with her own path to choose." A laugh rippled through the crowd at that last correction. "These children represent the future," Elowen said, adding her own voice to Cale's. "A future where power and compassion coexist, where strength doesn't mean domination, where every wolf, regardless of rank or status or blood, has the right to choose their own path." She looked down at her daughter, at the faint silver marks that pulsed with potential, and made a silent promise. "I promise you, Lyra, that you will never be trapped by circumstance the way I was. I promise you will never be told that you're less valuable because of what you are. And I promise that if anyone ever tries to take that choice from you, I will burn the world to give it back." It was the same promise Cale had made to her, she realized. Love as a commitment to protect someone's freedom, not their possession. Years passed. The reforms Elowen had championed became the foundation of a new society. The old hierarchies didn't disappear. Alpha wolves were still naturally dominant, Omegas still naturally bonded through their scent and pheromones, but the rigid oppression gave way to genuine cooperation. Young Alistair grew into a thoughtful alpha, taking after his father's wisdom more than his strength. He studied diplomacy and commerce, determined to prove that business could be ethical, that trade could be fair. Young Lyra. Well, Lyra discovered she didn't want to be constrained by any single path. At 15, she was learning combat from Elena, studying political philosophy with magistrates, spending time with the healing practitioners, writing poetry, and experimenting with her considerable powers. "She's going to be even more revolutionary than I was," Elowen told Cale one evening, watching their daughter through the study window as Lyra debated with scholars about the philosophical implications of consent in mate bonding. "She learned from the best," Cale said, pulling Elowen close. 20 years after her claiming, Elowen stood again at the balcony overlooking the capital. She was older now. Threads of silver in her dark hair, laugh lines around her eyes, marks of a life fully lived etched into her body. A messenger arrived with news from the Southern Territories. The rogue population had dropped to nearly zero. The reorganized packs were thriving. Most importantly, the cooperative governance structures had led to innovations, new agricultural techniques, improved trade routes, even scientific advances that benefited all the territories. "The world is changing faster than we anticipated," Elena reported. now ancient but still sharp as ever. The human kingdoms are taking notice. Some want to establish formal diplomatic relations. Others are frightened by how powerful we've become. Then we show them we have no interest in conquest, Elowen said. Only in coexistence. That will require a diplomatic mission, Elena observed. Someone who can represent our values of cooperation and equality. Elowen smiled, knowing exactly where this was going. You think Lyra is ready? I think she's been ready for years, Elena said. She just needed you to see it too. That night, Elowen talked to her daughter about the possibility, about representing the Northern Territories to the human kingdoms, about being an ambassador for their new way of doing things. Lyra's eyes lit up. Really? You'd let me do that? I would suggest it. Elowen corrected gently, remembering the lessons Cale had taught her about choice. But it would be your decision. Yes, Lyra said immediately. Yes, I want to do this. Elowen felt tears prick her eyes, not sadness, but the overwhelming emotion of watching your child become their own person, of seeing them make choices that you never could have imagined, pursuing dreams that you couldn't have dreamed. This was what she'd fought for. Not just her own freedom, but the freedom for future generations to imagine possibilities she couldn't. The final morning, before Lyra left for the human kingdoms, Elowen and her daughter sat together in the royal gardens, where Elowen had once sat with Elena, watching the sunset. I'm nervous, Lyra admitted. What if I mess up? What if I say the wrong thing and damage our diplomatic relations? Elowen smiled. Then you'll learn from the mistake and do better next time. That's all any of us can do. Calm, Mom, Lyra said, using the title she'd adopted when she was young. Why are you always so calm about everything? Don't you ever get scared that things won't work out? Of course I do, Elowen said. I get terrified. But I learned a long time ago that fear and courage aren't opposites. Real courage is being terrified and doing it anyway. She took her daughter's hand. I'm going to tell you something I wish someone had told me at your age. Your power, whatever form it takes, isn't just for using. It's for choosing. You get to decide what you do with it. You get to decide what kind of person you want to be, and no matter what path you choose. I'll support you. Lyra squeezed her mother's hand. I'm going to make you proud. You already have, Elowen said. Every single day, you make me proud by being yourself. As the sun set over the Northern Territories for what felt like the 1,000th time since Elowen had claimed her place as queen, she reflected on her journey, from scrubbing floors in an orphanage to ruling territories, from being told she was worthless to understanding her actual worth, from being hunted by alphas to being bonded to one who honored her agency. The path had been terrifying. There had been moments when she'd wanted to run, when the weight of responsibility felt unbearable, when she'd questioned whether she deserved any of this. But she'd learned something crucial along the way. Destiny wasn't something imposed from outside. It wasn't fate or magic or circumstances beyond your control. Destiny was the cumulative result of choices. Of choosing to be brave, of choosing to believe you deserved better, of choosing to show up for others even when you were broken. Elowen had awakened as Prime Omega, a body with power. But she'd become queen by choosing to use that power with wisdom and compassion, by choosing to build systems that honored everyone's agency, not just her own, by choosing to raise children who would continue the work of transformation. Cale found her on the balcony as darkness fell, the stars beginning to emerge in the night sky. Come to bed, he murmured, pulling her against him. In a moment, Elowen said. I'm just thinking about how far we've come. From what? Cale asked, though she knew he understood. From everything, Elowen said softly. From a kingdom divided against itself to one united by shared values. From a world where power was domination to one where it's stewardship. From a girl who believed she was worthless to this. She gestured at the glittering capital, the territories stretching beyond, the world that kept changing and growing and improving. And it's only the beginning, Cale said. That's what terrifies the other human kingdoms. They're not afraid of our power. They're afraid that we've discovered a way to organize society that actually works. That's contagious. Good, Elowen said. Let it be contagious. Let it spread. Not through conquest, but through inspiration. Through the simple, radical act of showing that a different way is possible. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars multiply as night deepened. The bond between them hummed softly, still strong after all these years, still pulsing with the connection that had drawn them together in a forest clearing and transformed both their lives. Somewhere in the capital, Lyra was packing for her diplomatic mission. Somewhere in the territories, other wolves were making choices big and small that would ripple outward and change the course of their world. And somewhere in the history books that hadn't been written yet, the story was being recorded. The story of the half-blood Omega who awakened as Prime, of the Alpha King who chose partnership over possession, of a queen who transformed a kingdom, not through strength alone, but through the terrifying, powerful combination of strength and mercy. "I love you," Elowen said. Not for the first time, but as if saying it for the first time. "I love you too," Cale replied. "Always." And as they walked back into the palace together, hand in hand, bonded not just by magic but by genuine, chosen, hard-won love, Elowen realized something profound. She wasn't the half-blood Omega anymore. She wasn't the unwanted orphan, or the hunted Prime, or the terrorized girl who'd run into the forest. She was Elowen, Queen of the Northern Territories, builder of a new society, mother of the future, woman who'd taken her power and used it to change the world. And that, she thought with a smile, was worth every moment of fear she'd ever endured. If Elowen's journey inspired you, if you believe that ordinary people can do extraordinary things through courage and love, subscribe and be part of a community that values that message, because every story like this matters. Every reminder that we have more power than we think matters. And every person who understands that choosing kindness is choosing strength matters. Tell me in the comments, what's your superpower? What would you do if you suddenly realized you had more strength, more agency, more control over your destiny than you ever imagined?